Chapter 56. Everyone could clearly feel Tan Shilai's rage that was close to losing his mind. In the hearts of Lu Dongyu and others who were familiar with him, Tan Shilai always seemed to be gloomy and vicious. Of course, he was angry, but it was never as obvious as it was today. At this moment, Tan Shilai's eyes were red and his breathing was messy and rapid. The cold killing intent was constantly brewing in him, making him look like a beast choosing its prey. He strode out of the bar. The waitress in front of the door, who was wearing a low-cut Chong Sam, saw his strange look and took a step forward subconsciously. Before she could ask, Tan Shilai had slapped her and knocked her out on the ground. He panted and kept muttering to himself. He walked to his car and started it. He glanced at Ning Qianqing who was following him and left directly. Ning Qianqing followed him without hesitation, his face expressionless. After walking out of the bar, Ning Qianqing drove Wang Yuetong's red sports car. This time, Wang Yuetong did not ask for anything and let Li Tianlan get in Ning Qianqing's car. She drove behind with the others. Gu Yulan and others drove with Tan Shilai. The two teams divided into two teams, left the bar and ran wildly in the city. From beginning to end, neither Li Tianlan nor Gu Yulan cared about Zhong Xiaofeng's injury. It seemed that the dying young master of the Zhong family had completely passed. But in fact, it was just the beginning. In the sports car, Ning Qianqing drove behind Tan Shilai's Lexus and could not help but glance at Li Tianlan again. Li Tianlan looked at the lights outside the window with a calm expression. Just when Ning Qianqing could not help but ask, he suddenly said softly, "Are you sure?" Ning Qianqing took the cigarette that Li Tianlan handed to him and lit it. He took a deep breath and said slowly, 100%. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and glanced at Ning Qianqing. "What I said is true," Ning Qianqing said softly in a somewhat complicated tone. Li Tianlan took a deep breath and said with a smile, "I believe you. I said I played with his mother, and it's true." Cough cough. Cough cough cough. Cough. Li Tianlan had just inhaled a puff of smoke when he heard this and suddenly coughed violently. The thick smoke swirled in his throat, making his voice hoarse. "What did you say?" Ning Qianqing's eyes were in a trance, with sadness, pleasure, and a trace of inexplicable helplessness. He glanced at the dumbfounded Li Tianlan and said with a smile, "To be exact, Tan Shilai's mother was my first woman. Tianlan, you should know who I am, right?" Li Tianlan couldn't come back to his senses at all. He just nodded subconsciously. His roommate in front of him was more than just an officer of the Border Praetorian Corps. In terms of family background, he was a Real Tiger from a family of generals. General Ning Ziyuan, the commander of the Eastern Theater of Operations, one of the 5 theater of operations in Jianghu State, was Ning Qianqing's father. However, for some unknown reason, Ning Qianqing had completely broken off relations with his family a few years ago and joined the Border Praetorian Corps. In these few years, he had not returned home even once. Therefore, when people looked at the younger generation of the 6 groups, they would subconsciously regard Ning Qianqing as a member of the Dongqing clan and the Giant group instead of the Ning family and the Southeast group. Could it be that Ning Qianqing had broken off relations with his family because of Tan Shilai's mother? Li Tianlan felt a headache coming on. Tan Shilai's father was Tan Qinghua, the deputy commander of the Eastern Theater of Operations and a capable general of the Prince Group. It could be said that he was Ning Ziyuan's main opponent and deputy in the Eastern Theater of Operations. Such a big shot in the military had been cuckolded by Ning Qianqing. What the hell was going on? Back then, Tan Shilai's mother was a famous beauty in our yard and even in the entire Jinling city. Although she was no longer young, she took good care of herself and looked like she was in her late 20s. I was still in high school when I fell in love with her. I have long forgotten how it started. Ning Qianqing said calmly, "But I used some tricks to get that woman." Tianlan, if you say that I'm despicable, I don't think there's anything to deny. I was indeed despicable. I was still young at that time and my thoughts were a little extreme. I always thought that she deserved it. Of course, even now, I don't think she's innocent. But now that I mention it, I really can't find the hatred I had in the past. Does Tan Shilai know about this? Li Tianlan asked. He couldn't tell what he was feeling in his heart. Yes. Ning Qianqing twitched the corner of his mouth and revealed a twisted smile. Once, it even happened in front of Tan Shilai, in his parents' bedroom, under his father's wedding photo. He's not blind, how could he not know? Not only him, But even Tan Qinghua knew later. I played with her for 2 years. How can there be an impenetrable wall? It's normal that he knows. Hearing the ferocity in Ning Qianqing's tone, Li Tianlan smiled helplessly and said, And then? And then? Nothing. I was with her for about 2 years. In the first year, Tan Xilai saw it, but I don't know what he was thinking, so he didn't tell his father. Later, I became even worse. As long as Tan Qinghua wasn't around, I would go to his house. Tan Xilai even rarely went home. If I hadn't deliberately thrown the woman's underwear in Tan Qinghua's car after we were done, he probably wouldn't have found out. Later, I left Jinling. In less than a year, Tan Xilai's parents got divorced. It was said that the woman went to Canada and left me her contact information, but I threw it away. Ning Qianqing took a big drag on his cigarette and laughed wildly. But Tianlan, believe it or not, I'm not bragging. If I still have that woman's contact information, I only need to make a phone call and that woman will immediately rush over from Canada and let me do whatever I want. Do you believe it? Li Tianlan didn't say whether he believed it or not. He just stared at Ning Qianqing, whose eyes were bitter, and asked, Why did you do that? I used to have a sister. Ning Qianqing was silent for a long time before he said in a low voice. Used to? Now she's dead. She was gang-raped and lost a lot of blood. Tan Xilai? Then your father at that time. For the so-called unity and promotion, for the interests of the whole family, what's the big deal about a daughter who isn't his own daughter? The topic ended there. The car fell into complete silence. This story, which was not very exciting and even a little sad, was undoubtedly the cause of Ning Qianqing's break with the Ning family and the beginning of his feud with Tan Xilai. Li Tianlan opened the window. The night wind whistled into the carriage, clearing his mind at once. So no matter what, sooner or later, I'll kill Tan Xilai sooner or later. He should have died a few years ago. If it weren't for his mother begging me to show mercy in bed, I wouldn't have lost to him that time. I lost to him once to give face to that woman. This time he must die. Ning Qianqing suddenly said, In fact, I also want to thank you. If you hadn't helped me find this opportunity, I wouldn't have done it now even if I wanted to kill him. How do you know that I'm not using you? Li Tianlan said flatly. You and I are brothers. How can you use me? Ning Qianqing shook his head and narrowed his eyes. If you need me to do it, I'll do it and avenge myself. It's killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Not only me, but Li Beitian probably thinks so too. There are so many interests and calculations between brothers. Your business is our business. But I'm curious, what do you want to do? I can understand that you crippled Zhong Xiaofeng, but you keep provoking Gu Yulan. Do you have any other plans? Of course I have other plans. Li Tianlan chuckled and said, But it's not so complicated. I just want to take this opportunity to make it big and see if I can find out someone's background. It'll be good for us in the future. As for why I asked you to do it, I've already crippled Zhong Xiaofeng and offended the Prince Group. How can I attack Kunlun City first? That's not finding out but courting death. But I want Kunlun City to join in, so I can only ask you to take the initiative to attack. I hoped that Gu Yulan could have a life-and-death fight with me directly, but I didn't expect that your words would completely infuriate Tan Xilai. Although it's not the best result, it doesn't seem bad now. Finding out. Ning Qianqing was deep in thought. You killed Tan Xilai, which may involve the people behind you. In a way, this is what I want to see most. If I only crippled Zhong Xiaofeng, the people behind me may not be willing to protect me. But if 1 or 2 other superpowers are involved, the situation will be different. You have the giant group and the southeast group behind you. From this point of view, you're the best candidate. Li Tianlan was completely telling the truth. He looked at Ning Qianqing's profile and said frankly, If you don't want to, stop the car now. It's not too late. Ning Qianqing looked at Li Tianlan with a strange look in his eyes. After a while, he chuckled and said, The Border Praetorian Corps has never been afraid of trouble. No one will say that I'm wrong to stand up for my brothers and comrades. But I'm curious, whose background do you want to find out? A lot of people, in the open and in the dark, good and bad, even including you and Beitian. Li Tianlan looked out of the window and said softly, Qianqing, I'm different from you. I come from a place where even birds don't shit. I have some family background, but they're not of much use for the time being. So I'm not used to hooting. You talk about the Wang family of Beihai, the 4 gods of Jianghu state, the 6, the Dongqing clan, and Sai city. I really don't understand. Of course, now I understand, but it's no different from not understanding. You can't understand the panic in my heart when I heard you talk about Jianghu state. I grew up in Jianghu state, but I always felt out of place in the entire Jianghu state. After I came to Huiting, this feeling became more obvious. Because of an elder in my family, I wanted to integrate myself. What happened tonight is an opportunity. Maybe it's not good enough, but I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to get anything from what happened tonight. I just want to test someone's bottom line and see things better. I can't see anything now. This feeling is not good. Really not good. Ning Qianxia was silent. The 2 teams of cars gradually drove out of the bustling city, and their speed was getting faster and faster. Have you ever thought that even if you get the force behind me involved, the person behind you is still not willing to protect you? What will you do? Ning Qianxia suddenly asked. Zhong Xiaofeng has a high status in the Zhong family. His injury tonight will definitely make the big tree in the Zhong family furious. Zhong Xiaofeng deserves it. Li Tianlan's tone was calm. Whether the person behind me is willing to protect me or not, he won't have a second result. He took out his mobile phone from his pocket and dialed a number. While waiting for the phone to be connected, he said softly, "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." Ning Qianxia nodded and said no more. Li Tianlan's phone was quickly connected. A gentle and elegant voice came directly into his ears. "Tianlan, what's the matter?" "I'm in trouble." Li Tianlan closed the window and said very straightforwardly. On the other end of the phone, Zhuang Huayang's voice seemed to be a little surprised. He said with a smile, "It's only the 2nd day of the holiday. What kind of trouble can you cause?" "I disabled Zhong Xiaofeng." Li Tianlan said lightly, "It seems to be Zhong Yongming's son." Zhong Yongming, one of the members of the Jianghu State Decision-Making Committee, the #1 leader of Huiting, and the towering tree of the entire Zhong family. Zhuang Huayang's breath suddenly stopped. He was silent for a full half a minute before he uttered a word. "Zhong Xiaofeng," Li Tianlan said again. Zhuang Huayang took a deep breath and then said with a wry smile, "How is his injury?" "His bones are all broken. He can live, but it's impossible for him to do anything else." Li Tianlan told the truth. "You're really good at causing trouble." Zhuang Huayang gasped. It was meaningless to ask why at this point. Zhuang Huayang was decisive and said directly, "What are you going to do?" "I'm worth it." Li Tianlan said calmly, "The current situation is, what should we do?" Zhuang Huayang was silent for a while. Li Tianlan sat in the car, looking out the window at the rapidly retreating lights in the night sky, waiting expressionlessly. He was not crazy enough to disable Zhong Xiaofeng just to test Zhuang Huayang and the academics. Even if Zhuang Huayang didn't talk to him, even if he didn't join the academics, even if he was still an ordinary freshman with no backing, even if he didn't sleep with Qin Wei Bai last night, he deserved to end up like this just because of Zhong Xiaofeng's words. She was the most beautiful scenery in his heart, a scenery that no one could insult. He didn't have the so-called big picture. His big picture was to protect all the people or things that he thought were worth cherishing. The glory of the Li family was important, but was his own woman not important? Weighing the two? How should he weigh it? Why should he compromise? Tonight, not to mention Zhong Xiaofeng, even if Zhong Xiaofeng's father dared to say such words, Li Tianlan would also dare to take action. At all costs. Now that things had come to this point, Li Tianlan naturally wanted to test the academic support for him. Whether the academics would protect him or not, Li Tianlan would not regret what happened tonight. If there was no support, facing the possible consequences, Li Tianlan could only take an unconventional approach. "Worth it?" Zhuang Huayang asked after a long silence. "Worth it." Li Tianlan compared himself to an object. His tone was calm, without any fluctuation. "I'm willing to support you," Zhuang Huayang said slowly, "and it's not just an intention. I will also take practical actions and attitudes. But I can only represent myself. I'm not sure about the Academy's attitude." He paused and continued, "I'll call the chief right away." The current situation in Huiting was extremely sensitive, and the Zhong family was the focus of attention. In recent months, Two core figures of the young generation of the Zhong family had been disabled. In the current situation, it was really hard to predict how the Zhong family would react. If the Zhong family insisted on the Sky Academy handing over Li Tianlan with a tough attitude, there was really not much he could do without the support of the academics. Zhuang Huayang looked serious and pondered. Facing the pressure of the Zhong family and the prince group, how would the academics choose? Every possibility was possible. Perhaps the academics would be inclined to hand over Li Tianlan and settle the conflict with the Zhong family. Li Tianlan had unlimited potential. The wind and thunder veins meant a bright future, and the academics would know that. But the problem was that no matter how terrifying the wind and thunder veins were, it took time to grow. Li Tianlan's realm was too low. Could the 10-year plan within the group be completed by Li Tianlan? Was it worth it to have a fierce conflict with the Zhong family for Li Tianlan? But if the chief decided to support Li Tianlan, Zhuang Huayang would not be surprised. 10 years was neither a long time nor a short time. Anything could happen. At least before today, the group had high hopes for Li Tianlan, who had just joined. And a few months ago, Wang Xiaoyao also disabled Zhong Yuwei of the Zhong family. At present, the Wang family of Beihai was also facing a certain degree of pressure. If the academics wanted to protect Li Tianlan, they should be able to reach an agreement with the Wang family of Beihai to some extent, and it would be convenient to operate. More importantly, although Li Tianlan's grandfather Li Honghe had been trapped at the border for many years, if they could take this opportunity to get the gratitude of an invincible realm expert like Li Honghe, the academics would never refuse. What would the chief choose? Zhuang Huayang frowned and pondered. Where are you now? Go back to the Sky Academy immediately. I'll negotiate with the Zhong family. Zhuang Huayang sighed and asked in a low voice. On the way. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes with a smile and said slowly, Qianqing and Tan Shilai have some grievances to settle. A life-and-death battle. Ning Qianqing. The Dongqing clan. Zhuang Huayang thought of the phone call he received from Zhongyuan province on the first day of school and the strange instructions. His eyes instantly lit up. If this trouble was handled well, not only would it not be a problem for the academic faction, it would even become an opportunity for the academic faction. Open your credit statistics form. I'll go there now. Zhuang Huayang took a deep breath and said in a low voice. Li Tianlan said, and hesitated. What about the chief? I'll persuade him, try my best. Zhuang Huayang's voice was close to a promise. Li Tianlan was slightly touched. No matter how many inside stories there were about him joining the academics, at least when it came to Zhuang Huayang, the old headmaster was really good to him. He took out a cigarette and lit it, then said with a smile, Headmaster, I'll give you a bargaining chip to make it easier for you to persuade him. Zhuang Huayang, who had gradually figured out some things, was in a good mood. He said with a smile, I know you have a trump card. Tell me. My realm is low, but it wasn't like this before. Li Tianlan looked out of the window and said softly, I once entered the thunder-shocking realm. Although it was only less than half an hour, my realm was real. He paused and continued, I was 17 years old that year, in the desert of Beijiang. Zhuang Huayang subconsciously held his breath, but his heart was beating wildly. A 17-year-old thunder-shocking realm. Li Tianlan slowly opened the watch on his wrist and said, You know what I mean, right? Of course. Zhuang Huayang said without hesitation, It's not hard to guess. Wait for my news. I'll come to you right away. Li Tianlan silently put away his phone, but his eyes gradually focused. The surrounding lights gradually became sparse. In front of the car, Tan Shilai's Lexus finally stopped. Chapter 57. Li Tianlan observed the surrounding environment immediately. Both of them were driving very fast. About half an hour had passed while chatting with Ning Qianqing. When the car stopped, Li Tianlan realized that they had arrived at the mountain. There were no high mountains in Huiting. It was more like a big slope than a mountain. It was dozens of meters above sea level at most. Even standing on the top of the mountain, there was no heroic spirit of climbing high and looking into the distance. The only good thing about this place was that it was quiet. No matter how they fought, no one would disturb them. It was the 15th of the month and there was a full moon in the sky. Far away from the lights, the barren mountain was shrouded in the moonlight and looked bright. Where are we? Li Tianlan's eyes had adapted to the light on the top of the mountain, and he glanced around. The lights were sparse and misty in the distance. There were mountains and forests everywhere, and there were no landmarks. Li Tianlan could only be sure that he was in the northwest of Huiting, but he had no idea where he was exactly. This is Mount Tong. Ning Qianqing came to Li Tianlan and whispered after getting off the car. What's so special about it? Li Tianlan asked Ning Qianqing, but he couldn't help looking at the Lexus in front of him. The door of the Lexus had been opened and Tan Shilai got out with a ferocious face. The killing intent was brewing all over his body. Obviously, Mount Tong was the place he chose for the life and death duel. This place was at least dozens of kilometers away from the bar. For this duel, they had gone around in a big circle. If it wasn't for the special significance of this place, it would have been much better to settle the duel nearby than here. Look over there. Ning Qianqing smiled and pointed in a direction. Li Tianlan followed his hand and looked over. In his sight, it was a forest bathed in the bright moonlight, but he could vaguely see some lights. That's the base of Huiting Special Operations Bureau. Ning Qianqing explained, it's about 2 kilometers away from here. Huiting Special Operations Bureau. Li Tianlan naturally knew about this hidden and independent agency. In Jianghu State, the Special Operations Bureau was nominally under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of State Security and the Ministry of National Defense, but in fact, it was only responsible to Kunlun City, the power center of the special warfare system of Jianghu State. Kunlun City was the highest leading institution of the special warfare system of Jianghu State, and the Special Operations Bureau scattered throughout Jianghu State was the extension of the special warfare system's power. Different from the civilian forces, this unknown institution represented the official voice of the entire special warfare system. Currently, the Special Operations Bureau was a provincial-level unit with 1 chief and 2 deputies. In theory, there were not many restrictions on the number of personnel. The director enjoyed the treatment of a governor-general, but his existence was kept secret and was not exposed. He was the highest authority in the special warfare system of a province. In some particularly important cities, there would be a special operations division, and the division chief would enjoy the same treatment as the head of the local administration. Huiting was not a particularly important city, but one of the most important cities and windows to the outside world in the entire Jianghu state. Its political and economic status was higher than that of ordinary provinces. Therefore, the Special Operations Bureau was still set up in Huiting, and it was one of the largest Special Operations Bureau in the entire Jianghu state. The director was at least an expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, with the rank of general, who enjoyed the treatment of a governor. In the entire Jianghu state, he was a real bigwig. So, Li Tianlan asked. He did not know what the Special Operations Bureau had to do with this final battle. I'm not from the Eastern Theater of Operations, so I don't know the details. It should be that the elites of the Eastern Theater of Operations are going to carry out a military anti-terrorism exercise with the Special Operations Bureau in Huiting in the next few days. This area can be considered as the scope of the exercise. Ning Qianqing looked at Tan Shilai, who was nearby, with pity in his eyes. Now my father and Tan Shilai's father are probably having a meeting in that base. He wants to kill me so that he can take my body to provoke my father, right? At the same time, he can let them vent their anger. What about you? Li Tianlan looked at Ning Qianqing. What will happen if you kill Tan Shilai? Will you take his body there too? Of course I will. What else can I do but run? Ning Qianqing scolded him with a smile. Do you think I'm stupid enough to walk into a trap? He is more like a politician than a soldier. These 2 years are a critical period for him. This time, whether I live or die, he won't care about me. So, Tianlan, you probably can't count on me to drag the Ning family into this. Maybe if I kill Tan Shilai, we will be hunted down by the Tan family all over the world. Isn't that exciting? When talking about his father, Ning Qianqing's tone was calm. It was not resentment or relief, but a real and thorough calmness, an emotion that was even more chilling than resentment. Li Tianlan didn't tease him. He just looked into his eyes and said seriously, You treat me as a brother, so I'll tell you the truth. Even if the worst happens tonight, you'll be fine. At worst, I'll leave the Sky Academy. But you have to be careful. Tan Shilai is 1 realm higher than you. If you are killed, it will be too late for me to do anything. Ning Qianqing took a deep look at Li Tianlan and said something similar to what Tan Shilai said in the bar. Give me 3 minutes. At the same time, Tan Shilai's suppressed and extremely ferocious voice sounded. Have you said enough last words? Drunbility Cheng, I don't have time to waste with you here. Wang Yuetong and Gu Yulan, who were a little behind, had already driven up the mountain. The two teams stood on opposite sides of each other, less than 100 meters away from each other, ready to fight. Ning Qianqing turned around calmly. He thought of his sister who had been closest to him since he was a child. He thought of her innocence, her despair and helplessness when she died, and Tan Shilai's ugliness and viciousness when pretending to be innocent. He thought of the woman's desire and shame when she was under him. He thought of his father, Ning Ziyuan's majesty and indifference at that time. The night wind whistled in the mountain. The bright moonlight shone on the valley. With Ning Qianqing as the center, a chill suddenly rose on Mount Tong. He gently clenched his fists. The sound of ice freezing spread through the whole space. The grass under everyone's feet was suddenly covered with a layer of white frost. Ning Qianqing's eyes were completely focused. He said calmly, "Make your move." F***CKU. Tan Shilai grinned hideously. As soon as the first word came out of his mouth, his figure had already rushed forward. The raging fire spread along with his figure. The white frost under his feet completely melted. As he passed, the whole patch of grass was burning. The sound of ice freezing in the air became more and more obvious. The sword intent was dense. An ice wall suddenly rose around Ning Qianqing, blocking Tan Shilai's way. In the roaring fire, Tan Shilai did not slow down at all. A long saber condensed from flames appeared in his hand. Obviously, he had not reached the stage of condensing fire into a weapon. The shape of the long saber in his hand was a little loose. However, Tan Shilai, who was sprinting with all his strength, did not care about it. He held the saber with both hands, leaped into the air, and fiercely chopped down. The blade of the long flame saber suddenly soared. The blade expanded from 1 meter to 3 meters, and then to 5 meters. The more it expanded, the looser the shape of the blade became. The flame at the front was drifting and almost disappeared. However, the blazing temperature kept rising. The loosely shaped blade chopped down at a high speed. Not only the ice wall in front of him, but also Ning Qianqing was shrouded by the blade. The flame was shapeless, but when the blade chopped down on the ice wall, the entire ice wall turned into countless pieces in an instant and flew in all directions. Ning Qianqing hurriedly retreated. A second ice wall rose in front of him, but the broken ice turned into countless ice swords in the blazing temperature. The ice swords formed a formation. The sword intent was dense, undulating, and continuous. Li Tianlan stared at every detail of the fight between the two and focused all his attention. Tan Shilai comes from the Azura path, and it can be said that he has received all the teachings. In recent years, the Azura path has been playing the most loyal lackey of Kunlun City, but it is also a martial arts force that has produced experts of the invincible realm. Their unique skills are extremely powerful, and they take the extreme path of giving up all defense and focusing only on offense. This move is called Selfless Killing Saber. It completely forgets itself and pursues the ultimate lethality. The unique skills of the Azura path are basically like this. They are a group of lunatics who don't take their lives seriously. Tan Shilai can be regarded as a person who has received the teachings of the Azura path. Wang Yuetong appeared beside Li Tianlan and explained softly. "What about Qianqing?" Li Tianlan asked with a slight frown. He only had a superficial understanding of the major martial arts forces in Jianghu state, and was far less familiar with them than Wang Yuetong. Azura path was named after Azura, which showed how bloodthirsty and ferocious its fighting style was. In Li Tianlan's opinion, the best way to deal with such an opponent was to fight the opponent's attack head-on. If he took one step back, he might fall back step by step until he had no chance to fight back in the end. Qianqing should be accumulating strength. Wang Yuetong felt more and more ice sword intent condensing in the field. She said with uncertainty, "I don't know what he wants to do next." The second ice wall in the field was smashed by the saber again. Ice pieces flew all over the sky. Ning Qianqing looked calm and the third ice wall appeared again. Tan Shilai waved his saber and attacked wildly. His eyes were blood red. At this moment, he was like a complete madman who kept chasing and attacking. His body was full of flaws, but he didn't care about them. He only wanted to attack, destroy, and kill. A large number of ice swords surrounded Ning Qianqing. More and more, the terrifying sword intent became more and more obvious. But he kept retreating and did not fight back. Was he unable to fight back? Or was he waiting for an opportunity? Li Tianlan took a deep breath and stared at the battlefield calmly. He was ready to fight with all his strength at any time. Don't worry. Qianqing is not as weak as you think. Wang Yuetong said, the quintessential unique technique of Jade Pool is the three-sword rain, which is also their most basic unique technique. Ning Qianqing is Dongqing Wudi's henchman. He has probably joined Jade Pool in recent years. Whether in terms of foundation or the power of unique techniques, Jade Pool is not inferior to Azura Path. Li Tianlan glanced at her and said nothing. It's true that Mount Shu has sword intent. But at least for now, it seems that Mount Shu is living off its past achievements. The eldest brother of Mount Shu has been stuck in the half-step invincible realm for many years and never made a breakthrough. In the past few decades, no invincible realm expert has appeared in Mount Shu. But in recent decades, Jade Pool has produced 2 invincible realm experts. Jade Pool's sword is also showing signs of surpassing Mount Shu's. If Qianqing has joined Jade Pool, it's not that he can't break through the current situation. He's deliberately accumulating strength and sword. Wang Yuetong pointed at Ning Qianqing and said, Senior brother, look. There are more and more swords around him. It seems that he intends to wait until he has accumulated enough sword intent and explode all at once to kill with one strike. Chapter 58. 2 chapters are published in a row, so there's one more ahead. Don't miss it, the 3rd chapter is at 7 p.m. 1 outbreak, 1 fatal blow. Li Tianlan looked at Wang Yuetong and couldn't help saying, it's quite similar to the unique skill of your Wang family of Beihai. It's just similar in appearance. Wang Yuetong shook her head. The essence is completely different. It's like a fight between ordinary martial artists who haven't entered the 4 realms of martial arts. The same punch and kick can be exerted in different ways. The 5th ice wall was broken. Li Tianlan was about to speak when his pupils suddenly contracted. Ning Qianqing, who had been holding back, suddenly took a step forward. Attack! Counterattack! A large number of ice swords whizzing around him straightened in an instant. All the ice swords lined up neatly and rushed toward Tan Shilai like a torrent. It was one of the 3 sword rains of Jade Pool. Floating sword rain. This was almost the most orderly sword rain that Li Tianlan had ever seen. It was so dense that it looked like a disciplined army or a delicate and magnificent sword formation. The wind in the night had completely disappeared. Everyone could only hear the fierce whistling of countless sword rain piercing through the air. It was bone-chilling and full of killing intent. The first ice swords that rushed to Tan Shilai exploded almost at the same time. The sword rain behind them was endless, hitting the flames on Tan Shilai's body one after another. Tan Shilai was still moving forward. The flames on his body were extinguished, and the long flame saber in his hand was blurred. But he was still moving forward without stopping. Li Tianlan sighed softly. Tan Shilai's character aside, at least his dedication to martial arts and fighting was impressive enough. Despicable! Wang Yuetong's expression suddenly changed and she shouted angrily. In the center of the battlefield, Tan Shilai, who was getting closer and closer to Ning Qianqing, suddenly strode forward. Bastard, go to hell! He suddenly laughed wildly and raised the blade in his hand. As he raised his arm, the originally blurry flaming long saber in his hand suddenly became several times more condensed than before. At the same time, the 2 of them were surrounded by rolling flames, and several huge flaming sabers appeared out of thin air. Although they were not as numerous as the sword rain, they were much more powerful. More than a dozen long sabers completely blocked Ning Qianqing's escape route. The air was twisted by the burning flames. More than a dozen long sabers fell at the same time and hacked at Ning Qianqing. A supreme skill of the Azura Dao. Light and Dust. It was a name that didn't sound very sharp, but it was the best move in the Azura Path to seal the enemy. The most important thing was that this move could not be used by an expert who had just entered the fire-flaming realm. Tan Shilai is not only in the breakthrough phase of the fire-flaming realm. He has broken through, so he should be in the stabilization phase now. Only in this way can he barely use the move Light with Dust. Wang Yuetong said in a hurry. Li Tianlan subconsciously took a step forward. But as soon as he took a step, a line of fire suddenly appeared in front of him. The line of fire quickly rose and turned into a curtain of fire. Gu Yulan stared at him from a distance, but her voice rang clearly in his ear. Do you want to die? Wang Yuetong pulled Li Tianlan's hand and said softly, "Don't worry, Qianqing may not lose." Li Tianlan gritted his teeth slightly, ready to go all out at any time. In his line of sight, Ning Qianqing suddenly let out a furious roar as he faced the flaming long sabers coming at him from all directions. The rain of swords whistled and surged, shooting in all directions. At this moment, he had also given up on defense and directed all of his swords towards the flaming blades in the air. No retreat. Ning Qianqing did not retreat at all. Instead, he went straight forward. An expert at the peak of the ice-condensing realm who had no defense ability was attacking an expert in the fire-flaming realm. Tan Shilai's eyes suddenly lit up with excitement. He laughed and stretched his limbs. A burst of crackling sounds rang out in his body. In an instant, Tan Shilai was completely wrapped in a large area of flames. Blood-bathing Azura. Wang Yuetong and Li Beitian spoke at the same time. Li Tianlan did not know what blood-bathing Azura was, but he could see how powerful this unique skill of Tan Shilai's was. To be exact, this was not a unique skill that could instantly increase the lethality, but a unique skill that could improve one's fighting state. At least in a short time, all the joints and muscles in Tan Shilai's body would be fully mobilized, making his strength and speed more terrifying. This was also a way of burning potential. How long this state could last completely depended on the user's willpower and physical strength. The Li family also had a similar unique skill. But this move, blood-bathing Azura, focused on combat strength and needed to burn potential. The unique skill of the Li family, on the other hand, focused on momentum. Pure momentum consumed willpower. The distance between the two sides was instantly shortened. Only Tan Shilai's roar could be heard on the battlefield. Blood-bathing Azura could be said to be the core inheritance of Azura Path. It could be used from the fire-flaming realm to the invincible realm. In a short time, his bones and muscles had been used to the extreme. Intense pain spread all over his body. Almost in the blink of an eye, the intense pain made Tan Shilai completely lose his mind. He only wanted to fight and completely tear all the opponents in front of him to pieces. Tear them to pieces. This was the most worthy way for Ning Qianqing to die. Only by dying like this could Tan Shilai wash away the shame he had suffered over the years. The long flame saber in the air disappeared. The sword rain disappeared. The moment the two were about to collide, a thin layer of ice suddenly appeared on Ning Qianqing's body. The thin ice melted and condensed. The flame went out and burned again. Their bodies collided fiercely. Ice and fire splashed in an instant. The sound of fists and feet colliding suddenly rang and disappeared. In Tan Shilai's hoarse roar, Ning Qianqing's figure flew out of the fire directly, and he spat out a large mouthful of blood. Qianqing! Li Tianlan stepped over the fire curtain and was about to attack with all his strength. It happened almost at the same second. Ning Qianqing's body shook violently in the air and he spat out another mouthful of blood. There was suddenly a glaring ice light between his hands. There was no sword rain. There was no sword. There was only a pale and glaring ice light that grew with the extension of his hands. The broken ice appeared in his hands and disappeared in an instant. At this moment, Ning Qianqing seemed to be holding a light in his hands. An overbearing and sharp sword energy formed with the light in his hands. Tan Shilai, whose eyes were red, roared and rushed forward, trying to tear his opponent to pieces. Ning Qianqing, who had been sent flying, was about to land. He stretched his hands to the limit and then suddenly closed them. In an instant, there seemed to be a pale rainbow shooting out from between his hands. The light extended to the limit. 5 meters. 10 meters. 15 meters. Ning Qianqing's body fell to the ground. He closed his eyes and coughed up blood, not even looking at the result. This was the most powerful sword move he could use at present. Although it was very forceful and had many flaws, he still used it. This was the unique skill of the Jade Pool Sword Sutra. It was derived from the 3 sword rains, but its status was higher than the 3 sword rains. Heaven-breaking rainbow sword. Tan Shilai's roar stopped abruptly. The white rainbow almost ignored the distance and the fire. The overbearing sword intent completely condensed and pierced through his chest. Fair and square. Fresh blood spurted out. His entire chest had been completely torn apart by the sword. Li Tianlan paused and then rushed to Ning Qianqing again. In the battlefield, Tan Shilai opened his mouth but no words came out. His body shook and fell to the ground, bringing up a large amount of black dust after the fire had burned out. Lying on the ground, Ning Qianqing stretched out his hand with difficulty, crushed a button on his shirt, and poured some powder from the button into his mouth. Qianqing, how are you? Li Tianlan looked at Ning Qianqing, who was almost covered in blood, and then at Wang Yuetong. He said without hesitation, "Do you have any medicine that can help Qianqing's injury?" "I owe you." "Yes." Wang Yuetong quickly glanced at Li Tianlan, as if she wanted him to owe her more. She took out a delicate small box from her pocket and opened it in front of Li Tianlan. There were more than 10 small secret compartments in the box, and in each compartment were some powders of different colors. "These are all useful to him. Are you sure you want to owe me?" Wang Yuetong said calmly. "Don't talk nonsense. Let him eat it." Li Tianlan answered without any hesitation. Wang Yuetong's eyes flickered slightly and she directly handed the small box to Li Tianlan. The corner of Ning Qianqing's mouth moved. Before he could say anything, Li Tianlan had squatted down and poured every kind of powder in the box into his mouth. "I'm a spendthrift. I won't die." Ning Qianqing finally spoke in a weak voice. "Don't talk so much and take care of your injury," Li Tianlan said crisply, his tone almost like an order. Ning Qianqing shook his head slightly and said softly, "I'm going to call the marshal." At this time, he did not choose to call his father, Ning Ziyuan, the commander of the Eastern Theater of Operations of Jianghu State. Instead, he chose to call the marshal of their border Praetorian Corps. He took out his cell phone, dialed a number, and waited quietly for the call to be connected. Li Tianlan squatted on the ground and raised his head subconsciously. The moonlight above the firmament was crystal clear, bright and gentle. In an environment that seemed to have calmed down, Li Tianlan's heartbeat gradually accelerated. He could clearly feel that for him, it was a different story. The storm was approaching. The general trend was approaching. Thank you for your support. Chapter 59. As Ning Qianqing and Tan Xilai had predicted, the battle ended in 3 minutes. Both of them had accurately estimated the time, but Tan Xilai had guessed the wrong result. The whole battlefield was silent. After the battle of life and death, the winner and loser were clear, but no one cheered or felt pain. Gu Yulan stood quietly on the top of the mountain with another mask on her face. The mask covered all her expressions, so no one could see what she was thinking. The moment Ning Qianqing's heaven-breaking rainbow sword appeared, her eyes fluctuated violently. But as the white rainbow that penetrated Tan Xilai disappeared, her eyes became indifferent again. "I lost," she said softly. Her voice was so low that it drifted with the night wind that the people around her could not hear her clearly. "He killed Tan Xilai." Su Yunzong roared and suddenly stepped forward. "Stop." Gu Yolan's cold voice sounded with a strong sense of command. Su Yunzong paused and looked back at Gu Yulan without saying a word. "Don't get involved in things that we shouldn't get involved in." Gu Yulan looked at Su Yunzong and said calmly. Before the unconvinced Su Yunzong could speak, she turned to Lu Dongyu and said softly, "Do you understand?" She deliberately softened her voice and sounded even more coquettish. But Lu Dongyu, who had been with her and rarely spoke, felt her scalp tingle. She nodded stiffly and said nothing. In the former flames of war, the big brother Lu Dongchao died in the entrance maneuver. Now the third brother, Tan Xilai, was also killed by Ning Qianqing. She was the only woman left, alone. Some of the backbones of the organization were either seriously injured or quit. They were no longer the giants of the last generation. What would happen to the flames of war in the future? Lu Dongyu glanced at Gu Yolan's expression and her heart sank to the bottom. "What are we going to do next?" Su Yunzong asked in a low, muffled voice as he stared in the direction of Li Tianlan and Ning Qianqing. In the bar, he and Li Tianlan exchanged a punch and were sent flying on the spot. Although he was not seriously injured, he lost face. The most important thing was that he was not convinced at all. In the eyes of outsiders, Li Tianlan, who was only in the chi-controlling realm but possessed the wind and thunder veins, was naturally terrifying. However, in the eyes of Su Yunzong, Li Tianlan played a trick. His punch was naturally powerful, but he took advantage of the fact that he was faster than Su Yunzong. That was the perfect combination of strength and speed. Su Yunzong was convinced by this technique, but he didn't think he was weak. If he had been fully prepared, it might have been Li Tianlan who was sent flying. "Wait," Gu Yulan said in a simple tone. "Go and bring Tan Xilai's body here. I know you're not convinced, but there will be plenty of opportunities in the future. There's no hurry. She turned to look at the faint lights at the foot of the mountain. The battle was over. The coldness on the top of the mountain disappeared and the temperature dropped. A soft breeze blew past, making people feel very comfortable. One after another, police cars rushed over at the extreme end of their sight. The shrill sirens were faint, but it sounded very lively. There's going to be a good show tonight. Gu Yulan murmured to herself and glanced in the direction of Li Tianlan and the others. Ning Qianqing had hung up the phone and was lying on the ground to rest. The battle with Tan Xilai might not be tragic in the eyes of the spectators, but it was extremely thrilling. Ning Qianqing defeated Tan Xilai, but he also paid a heavy price. At the very least, a serious injury was inevitable. Fortunately, Wang Yuetong had brought a lot of drugs, so he would not be left with any sequelae. But for a while, because of Ning Qianqing's injuries, they had to be careful even to move him, not to mention escape. The Wang family of Beihai was ahead of the world in the technology of gene drugs. But except for the series codenamed Youth, which was regarded as a core treasure by the Wang family, the other drugs needed time to take effect, at least half an hour. During this time, with Ning Qianqing's injuries, the slightest movement could aggravate his injuries again. Li Tianlan sat beside Ning Qianqing, smoking and waiting quietly. After Ning Qianqing's injuries were stabilized, he was completely relieved. He was actually very calm, so calm that even he himself felt surprised. Everything that happened tonight was far from triggering the general trend of hooting. Crippling Zhong Xiaofeng and killing Tan Xilai were, at best, preemptively detonating some storms that had been brewing in hooting for many days. In other words, he had taken the initiative to enter the game. He had taken the initiative to enter the general trend that could easily tear anyone, even a wealthy family, apart. Li Tianlan did not know what he could get, and he did not even know how he would end up. But he was very clear about one thing. If he stood outside the game, he would get nothing, and he would not even be able to see clearly what was going on inside the storm. He wanted an opportunity. And the opportunity was in the general trend that was about to erupt in the surging undercurrent. Li Tianlan did not want to wait any longer, and he had no time. No one could understand the fear and depression in his heart when there was no one around in the middle of the night. He was really afraid, not of death, but of failure, of not doing well enough, of disappointing his grandfather, of letting his father continue to bear the humiliation, and of letting the Li family continue to be lonely. It was only a few thousand kilometers from the border to Huiting, but it was a completely different fate for Li Tianlan from the border to here. In less than a month, the Wang family of Beihai, Dongqing clan, Kunlun City, 6, Jade Pool of Mount Shu, Sai City, and other behemoths that were powerful enough to influence the general trend of Zhongzhou state appeared in front of him one after another in a flourishing atmosphere, either overtly or covertly. Li Tianlan could maintain his composure on the surface, but the pressure in the dark almost made him breathless. That was the feeling of destiny quietly approaching, which could not be resisted and could not be resisted. The undercurrent in Huiting was surging. The danger seemed to be extremely far away from Li Tianlan, but the opportunity was also extremely far away from him. He knew that he had to join the game, even if he was smashed to pieces, even if he was doomed eternally. Because in this game, there was an opportunity that he needed. If the academics were willing to give him enough support, if he could become the survivor of this game, then the entire Li family would start over. This was the first step. It might not be stable, but he had no choice. Was he going to walk into a hopeless situation? Then he would walk into a hopeless situation. Li Tianlan suddenly smiled. All his decisions tonight were extremely crazy, but his heart was unprecedentedly calm. Coming back from the jaws of death, he muttered to himself in a low voice, his tone erratic. What? Ning Qianqing, who was lying beside him, opened his eyes and looked at him and asked. Nothing. Li Tianlan shook his head and looked at Ning Qianqing. Suddenly, he squinted and smiled. The sword intent of the last sword is so great that its power is no longer at the ice-condensing realm, but directly into the fire-flaming realm. Should I congratulate you? One more meditation, Ning Qianqing said. Ning Qianqing said. He had been stuck at the peak of the ice-condensing realm for more than 2 years and his realm was almost perfect. Tonight's battle could be said to be the ultimate release of all his combat strength. On the brink of life and death, he got his revenge. Now, he was only one meditation away from the fire-flaming realm, and it would not take long. It's not easy. Li Tianlon's eyes were sincere. Congratulations. Yeah, congratulations. Li Baitian's somewhat sour voice sounded. I was originally ranked ahead of you, but I didn't expect you to break through first. I'm still missing an opportunity. I don't know how long I'll have to wait. For any genius, entering the fire-flaming realm from the ice-condensing realm was a real threshold. In the 4 realms of martial arts, the chi-controlling realm and the ice-condensing realm mainly pursued strength, speed, and explosive force. But to transform tangible and tangible ice into intangible and intangible fire required extremely focused willpower. Only by crossing the fire-flaming realm could one be considered a real expert. This was the consensus of the dark world. Any genius could be stuck at this threshold. It was normal for a few months or even a few years. But once this threshold was crossed, a warrior's strength, speed, explosive force, willpower, and physical coordination would develop in a perfect direction, and he would sprint towards the thunder-shocking realm step by step. If entering the fire-flaming realm from the ice-condensing realm was the threshold, then entering the thunder-shocking realm from the fire-flaming realm was the gap. For countless years, countless geniuses stood outside this gap and could not even take half a step forward in their lives. Only a few people who easily crossed this gap were called real geniuses. For these real geniuses, the thunder-shocking realm was their life's peak of martial arts. Entering the invincible realm from the thunder-shocking realm was a natural moat. No one could accurately describe what kind of state could allow one to enter the invincible realm. Only they themselves knew the scenery of the invincible realm. That realm was so mysterious that even the most basic teaching couldn't be done. Therefore, in a general sense, although martial arts were divided into 4 realms, only the fire-flaming realm was the real beginning. After the fire-flaming realm, the scenery of ascending to heaven step by step was also the goal that all martial artists pursued tirelessly. Li Baitian was also in a state where he could break through at any time but was just a step away. Now that he saw Ning Qianqing was 1 step ahead of him, it would be a complete lie to say that he was not envious and jealous. What are you jealous of? Ning Qianqing was not polite to Li Baitian at all. He said in a weak voice, when this is over, I will have a chance to finish my meditation. It's not too late for you to be jealous. The shrill siren came from afar and became clearer. A large number of police cars with flashing lights rushed over in a mighty manner. Everyone's expression turned solemn. Cousin, I called my dad. He's in Yuzhou for a meeting, but he's already asked Secretary Sun to rush over. I think he'll be here soon. Zhang Holong said with a solemn expression. After the old master of the Zhang family retired, Zhang Holong's father, Zhang Xiaohua, carried the banner of the Zhang family. Now he was one of the standing committee of Huiting, and in charge of discipline inspection. His ranking was only second to the secretary, the mayor and a deputy secretary ranking 4th. In the whole of Huiting, Zhang Xiaohua was a real figure of power. What was certain was that this was not the end of his official career. Ning Qianqing glanced at him and nodded slightly. My dad asked me to go home immediately. I guess he's going to send someone to take me back. I'm really upset tonight. Han Xinyan pursed her small mouth and looked conflicted. Tonight's matter could be big or small. Small. Definitely not small. If it was big, it would not be big no matter how big it was. The Han family was a standard neutral wealthy family, and Han Donglu would not take sides easily. It was completely understandable that he asked Han Xinyan to go home. Second uncle said that it's not convenient for him to show up in this matter, but he will communicate with Uncle Yu and let them handle it according to the circumstances. Wang Yuetong's expression changed. Obviously, she also did not understand the meaning of Wang Xiaoyao's words. The Uncle Yu she mentioned was the same as Zhang Holong's father, Zhang Xiaohua. They were both capable people of the Southeast Group, but his status was 1 level higher than Zhang Xiaohua's. He was the current mayor of Huiting, Yu Chuanguang. Wang Yuetong knew some complicated relationships in her family very well. Yu Chuanguang had a very good relationship with second uncle. In the few years since he came to Huiting, he had always been low-key and pragmatic, and had a very positive reputation among the people. In the chessboard of the Southeast Group in Huiting, second uncle had been playing a high-profile role in recent years. He was extremely flamboyant and cooperated with Yu Chuanguang in many ways. They could even be said to be the best partners. Now second uncle needed to keep a low profile for the time being, and Yu Chuanguang would certainly not tolerate it. This incident might be an opportunity for both the Southeast faction and Yu Chuanguang. However, because it had nothing to do with them, and Li Tianlan and second uncle were rivals in love, Wang Yuetong could not tell how second uncle would communicate with Yu Chuanguang. If someone catches you later, hold my hand and I'll take you out first. Wang Yuetong approached Li Tianlan and whispered. Wang Yuetong approached Li Tianlan and whispered. Her bright eyes were filled with deep worry. Chapter 60. Wang Yuetong was not worried about Ning Qianqing. These police cars were obviously here because of Zhong Xiaofeng, and their target was Li Tianlan. As for Ning Qianqing killing Tan Xilai, the police must not have received the news. Moreover, Tan Xilai was a serving officer of the Eastern Theater of Operations, while Ning Qianqing belonged to the Border Praetorian Corps. It was not appropriate for the police to handle such a case, so it was most likely to be handled by the military. The base of Huiting Special Operations Bureau was a few kilometers away. Tan Xilai's father and Ning Qianqing's father were having a meeting there. It should be Huiting Special Operations Bureau to arrest Ning Qianqing and temporarily detain him for one night. One night was not a short time, but once Ning Qianqing entered the Special Operations Bureau, he would be under the eyes of his father, Ning Ziyuan. No matter how stiff the relationship between father and son was, Ning Ziyuan could not watch his son being skinned and pulled out. Even if he was determined to do so, others would not dare to do so. By the end of the night, the Border Praetorian Corps would have already responded and there would be more room for negotiation. Wang Yuetong was most worried about Li Tianlan. She did not know what his background was. According to Yu Qingyan, he was just a junior of Yu Donglai's old comrade in arms. This was definitely not true. If it was true, at least Qin Weibai's appearance could not be explained. But in her short contact with Li Tianlan, she did find that this senior brother did not seem to have a strong background. If he was taken away by the police tonight, she was almost sure that before dawn, Li Tianlan would die miserably. To the public, it could even be said that he committed suicide to escape punishment. I'll take him out first and think of a way. Wang Yuetong thought silently and subconsciously reached out to hold Li Tianlan's hand tightly. Don't worry. Li Tianlan was touched, but his tone was still calm. The headmaster will be here soon. The headmaster? Wang Yuetong was stunned and then her eyes widened. Headmaster Zhuang Huayang? Li Tianlan nodded and said. Wang Yuetong breathed a sigh of relief. She was not the only one who breathed a sigh of relief. Li Baitian and Ning Qianqing also felt relieved. Ning Qianqing coughed and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He forced a smile and said, If he had come fast enough, I could have suffered less tonight and followed him to the Sky Academy to take refuge. It's just a delay. Leave it to me. Wang Yuetong said softly, Ho Long and I will handle it. Feeling relaxed, she became very interested in Ning Qianqing's last move. Looking at his relaxed expression, she suddenly asked, Qianqing, was that the move you used just now, the heaven-breaking rainbow sword of Jade Pool? Ning Qianqing nodded slightly. There was nothing to hide. As he entered the fire-flaming realm in the future, he would fight more and more. This move was no secret at all. Your main sword style? Wang Yuetong blinked her bright eyes and became more curious. All the unique skills of the Jade Pool were derived from their most basic 3 sword storms. The 3 sword storms were the overall framework of the Book of Sword of the Jade Pool. After the 3 sword storms came the famous 7 swords of the Jade Pool in the Dark World. The sky-splitting rainbow sword was one of the 7 swords. The Book of Sword of the Jade Pool with a total of 10 moves was broad and profound. Any core disciple would learn the 3 sword storms of the Jade Pool first. It was more of a choice than a study. The 3 sword storms were the easiest to master and the most difficult to master. All the core disciples of the Jade Pool would choose one of the 3 sword storms as their main sword rein when learning the Book of Sword of the Jade Pool. This was their first choice. After that, they would choose the sword style of the 7 swords of the Jade Pool, which was also the most powerful move in their lives. It didn't mean that they only knew one move. It was just that after practicing the sword intent of one of the 7 swords, the other 6 swords would have the shadow of this move. Every core disciple of the Jade Pool chose different sword rein and sword style as their main sword style. Every time they attacked, the same sword style would be different. That was why the sword intent of the Jade Pool was so varied and had a tendency to surpass that of Mount Shu. After the death of the senior of the invincible realm of the Jade Pool many years ago, the most famous disciple of the Jade Pool in recent years was the military marshal Dongqing Wudi, known as the god of massacre of Jianghu State. He was one of the top 10 experts of Jianghu State, an expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm or even a half-step to the invincible realm. He mainly practiced Prairie Burning Sword Storm and Nine Heavens Wind and Thunder Sword. It was said that when he attacked, his murderous intent soared like the power of heaven, which was completely different from Ning Qianqing's sky-splitting rainbow sword. Before Ning Qianqing could answer, the mighty convoy of police cars had rushed up the mountain. The shrill sirens instantly surrounded the whole mountain top. Teams of policemen in riot suits jumped out of the cars and used the cars as cover. They raised their guns and aimed at Li Tianlan and the others, including Gu Yulan. The number of police cars increased. So did the number of policemen. The sound of footsteps could be heard all over the mountain. Countless figures shuttled back and forth. Under the flashing police lights, every policeman's expression seemed to be extremely gloomy and serious, giving people an unprecedented heavy pressure. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes slightly. At this moment, facing so many guns, so many policemen, and feeling the seriousness and solemnity of the state apparatus, he suddenly found himself very lonely. Although he had Wang Yuetong, Ning Qianqing, Li Beitian, Zhang Holong, and Han Xinyan by his side. But the feeling in his heart kept getting stronger and stronger and could not be suppressed. People in front, listen up. We are policemen. I am He Qingting, the deputy director of Huiting Police Station. You have been surrounded. Put down your weapons and come over with your hands behind your head. Surrender is your only way out. A low and sharp voice came through the loudspeaker in the large number of police cars. Surprisingly, the voice turned out to be a female voice. The female voice was getting closer and closer. A female figure in a police uniform appeared directly in front of the policeman. Her eyes were dignified and serious. The woman was about 30 or 40 years old. She had short hair and was tall and even a little strong. She was not ugly, but combined with her strong figure, she could not be called a beauty. She could only be described as a very domineering woman. She held the loudspeaker and glanced around. When she saw Gu Yulan and the others, she directly waved at them. Then she turned to Li Tianlan and the others and said angrily, "Put your hands behind your head and squat down." No one moved, no one put their hands behind their head, and no one squatted down. Wang Yuetong, who was standing beside Li Tianlan, whispered, "Senior brother, don't underestimate this woman. She is one of the mad dogs raised by the Zhong family in Huiting. She graduated from the Sky Academy and used to serve in a special warfare squadron in Yuzhou. She was transferred here by the Zhong family to be the deputy director of Huiting Police Station. She has bitten many people in recent years and has a very firm stand." Li Tianlan nodded slightly. In his sight, the strong He Qingting had already strode over with 2 policemen. She didn't pull out her gun, but her steps were firm and full of courage. "Deputy Director He, isn't it inappropriate to make such a big scene to deal with us young people? Take a look for yourself. There are hundreds of police officers armed with live ammunition. Those who don't know would think that you're encircling terrorists." As He Qingting walked in, Wang Yuetong took the initiative to speak before He Qingting could speak. At this moment, she was still holding Li Tianlan's hand, but her modesty and nobility were vividly displayed. "Who are you?" He Qingting glanced at her and asked bluntly in a harsh tone. "My name is Wang Yuetong." Wang Yuetong glanced at her and said lightly, "When I have dinner with Mayor Yu another day, I will tell him the truth about Deputy Director He's action tonight and let him know the prestige of the Huiting Police." Wang Yuetong. Mayor Yu. He Qingting's expression changed as if she was a little fearful. He looked at Wang Yuetong and asked, "Did you beat Zhong Xiaofeng?" Wang Yuetong's heart moved and she was about to admit it. "It was me." Li Tianlan smiled and directly stopped Wang Yuetong's words. In any case, he could not let Wang Yuetong bear the responsibility for this matter. He dared to do this, so he was prepared to bear all the consequences. "Director, there was a murder here. The victim is..." A police officer strode over, hesitated for a moment, and then whispered the identity of the victim in He Qingting's ear. The look in He Qingting's eyes changed for a moment. She looked at Li Tianlan with pity, as if she was looking at a dead man. "Did you kill him too?" He Qingting asked. "It was me." Behind her, Ning Qianqing's weak voice sounded, "I killed him." "Very good. You're loyal." He Qingting gave a grim smile and suddenly waved her hand. "Cuff them up and take them away. Shoot anyone who dares to resist." He did not intend to ask the identity of these people, because it would be difficult to explain. Moreover, tonight he came with the order of her behind-the-scenes boss. Except for Wang Yuetong, it seemed that there was nothing worth being afraid of among the several people present. I advise you to wait. Li Tianlan looked at He Qingting and chuckled. Otherwise, you may not be able to bear the consequences. The wristwatch on his wrist was vibrating slightly. It was a signal from Zhuang Huayang, indicating that he was nearby and had even arrived at the scene. The transmission distance of this signal vibration was only 200 meters. As long as Zhuang Huayang came, at least nothing would happen tonight. He Qingting narrowed her eyes and suddenly spat on the ground. She sneered and said, "Who the F***ck do you think you are? How dare you talk to me about the consequences? He is my man." A cold and ethereal voice suddenly sounded, crisp and sweet like a fairy's voice. Li Tianlan suddenly raised his head. Qin Weibai's figure appeared together with Zhuang Huayang. She walked through the crowd and quickly came to He Qingting, whose face was a little stiff. She slapped her hard in the face. It was a crisp slap. He Qingting's body suddenly staggered. She covered her face with her hands and her eyes were filled with rage. "Who the F***ck do you think you are? How dare you take my man away?" Slap. After slapping the left cheek, she slapped the right cheek. Qin Weibai's delicate and perfect face was completely cold. After slapping He Qingting twice in a row, she stood beside Li Tianlan and continued, "Who the F***ck do you think you are? How dare you take my man away?" He Qingting's eyes were wild. She was about to slap back regardless of the consequences when Qin Weibai struck again. She raised her arm and pressed an oversized pistol directly against He Qingting's head. The force was so great that He Qingting's entire head was jerked backward. Qin Weibai's face was expressionless. Her delicate body was straight and her long hair casually draped behind her head fluttered backward with the mountain wind. She held the pistol with one hand and her finger was tightly on the trigger. Her eyes were cold and indifferent, and her whole person was filled with an indescribable strength and dominance. Like a goddess. Like a queen. Chapter 61. It was almost late at night. The No. 1 villa area of Huiting Special Operations Bureau was still brightly lit. There were 9 detached villas in the No. 1 villa area, which could be said to be the most luxurious place in the whole base. It was the residence of the senior officials and VIPs of Huiting Special Operations Bureau, located in the center of the whole base. Even though it was in the wilderness, living in a villa was also a kind of enjoyment. Tan Qinghua, the deputy commander of the Eastern Theater of Operations, temporarily lived in the 9th building of the No. 1 villa area. As a military general of the Prince Group, Tan Qinghua, who was in his early 50s, was thin and old with age spots on his face. His undyed hair was gray. He didn't look like a general with real power who had just turned 50, but more like an ordinary old man in his 60s or 70s. It was said that when Tan Qinghua was young, he was also a member of the special warfare system of Jianghu State. At his peak, he was even an expert close to the thunder-shocking realm. However, he was captured by foreign forces during a mission and suffered all kinds of tortures for half a month. His martial arts strength, which was absolutely not weak, was destroyed, and his body also fell ill, which hadn't improved for many years. However, this general of Jianghu State was extremely tenacious. After being successfully rescued, he transferred from the special warfare system to the General Staff Headquarters to be a civilian officer. In nearly 20 years, he worked steadily and rose to the top several times, and finally sat in his current position. His life was almost a living legend, full of ups and downs, forbearance, and wisdom. He was definitely a famous figure in the military and the special warfare system of Jianghu State. The lights in the villa were very bright. The almost dazzling light covered every corner of the villa, making everyone's eyes a little uncomfortable. But no one present said anything. Everyone just quietly looked at Tan Qinghua, who was sitting on the sofa, carefully. Tan Qinghua sat quietly on the sofa, expressionless. In front of him was a stretcher covered with a clean and tidy white cloth. Under the white cloth was the body of his son, Tan Shilai. Tan Qinghua had 2 sons. His eldest son did not know martial arts and was now serving as a staff officer in a division of the Southern Theater of Operations. He was the deputy regimental commander and had a bright future ahead of him. Tan Qinghua's youngest son was Tan Qinghua, who had been practicing martial arts since he was a child. When he grew up, he was sent to the Azura path by Tan Qinghua, who had strict requirements for him. Tan Qinghua had high hopes for his two sons, one of whom was a scholar, while the other was a martial artist. Tan Qinghua had high hopes for them, especially Tan Xilai, who was strong-willed, talented, and quick-witted. He had always been regarded as a successor by Tan Qinghua. The relationship between father and son was excellent. In Tan Qinghua's mind, Tan Xilai could be said to be the only and best choice to support the Tan family in the future. But now, his biological son, whom he had high hopes for, was lying silently on a stretcher and had become a lifeless corpse. The white-haired person sends the black-haired person off. How painful was it? No one could understand Tan Qinghua's feelings. Even Tan Qinghua himself did not know what he was feeling right now. The moment he received the bad news, his entire heart felt empty. There was no anger, no resentment, no sorrow. Numbness seemed to be the only thing he felt. He just sat on the sofa, and as time passed, he didn't want to move, he didn't want to speak, and he didn't want to do anything. Old Tan, near Tan Qinghua, a middle-aged man in camouflage clothes called out. He wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. He was about the same age as Tan Qinghua, but his image was completely different. He was a tall and straight man with black hair and a dignified look. The two golden stars on his shoulders, which represented the status of a lieutenant general, looked more dazzling under the light. But at this moment, he looked at Tan Qinghua with an extremely careful expression and a very soft voice. Tan Qinghua, who had been sitting on the sofa for a few hours, finally moved. But he did not raise his head. He just slowly knelt in front of Tan Xilai's body and slowly reached out his hand. His hands were trembling violently. His skinny fingers clenched the white cloth tightly and slowly pulled it down. Tan Xilai's pale and livid face gradually appeared in front of everyone. Tan Xilai looked at him silently. He opened his mouth, but for a moment, he could not make a sound. Old Tan. The lieutenant general in camouflage clothes nearby took a step forward and couldn't help calling out again. Tan Qinghua looked up blankly. He twitched the corner of his mouth and said in a hoarse voice, "Changjiang, my son was killed." In the entire Huiting, there was only one lieutenant general named Changjiang. He was Lieutenant General Gu Changjiang, the director of the Huiting Special Operations Bureau, one of the elders of Kunlun City and the backbone of the entire Special Warfare Group. Gu Changjiang and Tan Qinghua had been friends for many years and had a good personal relationship. Now, seeing the desolation and confusion in his old friend's eyes, he also felt bad. But no matter how bad it was, he did not dare to act rashly. Everything that happened tonight was a bit weird. Not only was Tan Xilai killed, but also the young master of the Zhong family, Zhong Xiaofeng, was completely disabled. Gu Changjiang did not get specific information because it happened so soon. According to the latest news, Zhong Xiaofeng was still being rescued. Whether he could get out of danger or not depended entirely on his luck. However, these two incidents were done by the same group of young people. Moreover, they were done by a group of young people with extremely complicated backgrounds. Gu Changjiang could not figure out the nature of the matter for the time being. How could he dare to act rashly? He had a good personal relationship with Tan Xilai, but it was just a personal relationship after all. Their positions were not exactly the same. The Prince Group and the Special Warfare Group had been advancing and retreating together in recent years. They were the closest allies, but allies were completely different from their own people. The difference between them was neither big nor small. Take what happened tonight as an example. If Gu Changjiang insisted on standing up for Tan Xilai now, it meant that the Special Warfare Group had intervened in this matter before the Prince Group made a clear response. In this way, not to mention the reaction of the Special Warfare Group, even the Prince Group would not appreciate it. Before getting the approval from the top, the only thing Gu Changjiang could do was to say a word of condolence to Tan Qinghua. "Don't be too sad." Gu Changjiang hesitated for a moment and walked to Tan Qinghua. He patted him on the shoulder and said in a low voice, "Xilai doesn't want to see you like this either." "He can't see it." Tan Qinghua said in a dull tone, "He's gone. How can he see it?" Gu Changjiang wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Tan Qinghua did not look at him. He gently stroked his son's cold face and said with a soft look in his eyes, "We had lunch together at noon. Who would have thought that things would suddenly turn out like this at night? You're very talented and smart since you were young. You're much better than your brother. Originally, I was counting on you to take over my position, but I didn't expect you to leave without saying a word. You're really ruthless. I've always told you about a sense of responsibility and a man's responsibility, but you've turned a deaf ear to it. I've noticed your bad habit of holding a grudge a long time ago, but I didn't take it seriously. It's not a bad thing to hold a grudge. If someone dares to do us wrong, we must pay them back. But you are so stupid. You want to take revenge when you don't have the strength. In the end, you have to ask me to take revenge for you. What the hell is this? Tan Qinghua knelt beside Tan Shilai's body and gently bent down to kiss his son's cold forehead. He said softly, "Don't worry. Dad will take revenge for you soon." Gu Changjiang's expression changed slightly. A young man a little further away from Gu Changjiang and Tan Qinghua also changed his expression slightly. The young man was about 32 or 33 years old and wore a pair of glasses. Although he was wearing a military uniform, he exuded a refined temperament that belonged to a civil servant. Rather than calling him a soldier, it would be more appropriate to describe him as a scholar. Hearing Tan Qinghua's hoarse and calm but firm promise, the young man touched his glasses and said softly, "Commander Tan, I'm sorry for your loss." Tan Qinghua raised his eyelids and glanced at him. In a short time, he seemed to have completely calmed down. This general of the prince group sat back on the sofa and stared at the young man in front of him. He said indifferently, "Who killed Shilai?" "Here's the thing. Let me ask you who killed Shilai." Tan Qinghua directly interrupted him and repeated in a calm tone. The young man with glasses opened his mouth and didn't know how to answer for a moment. Who killed Tan Shilai? Everyone present knew the answer to this question, including Tan Qinghua. But because of his identity, the young man couldn't say it. Because he was the secretary of Ning Ziyuan, the commander of the Eastern Theater of Operations, and Ning Ziyuan was Ning Qianqing's father. If he really told Ning Ziyuan who the murderer was, Ning Ziyuan would probably be in a passive position. Tan Qinghua's question was a bit heart-wrenching. "Commander Tan, we are all very sorry that such a thing happened. Commander Ning hopes that you can calm down and that he will give you a satisfactory explanation. He hopes that you can focus on the overall situation and not affect your work. If it's convenient for Commander Tan, Commander Ning has something to discuss with you about work," the young man said calmly while carefully observing Tan Qinghua's reaction. This was the main purpose of his visit today. It was more to find an opportunity to see if he could ease the relationship between the two sides than to express his condolences. Ning Qianqing killed Tan Shilai. To put it simply, it was a grudge between two young people. To put it simply, it was a grudge between two powerful figures in the Eastern Theater of Operations. The pain of losing a son seemed to be irreconcilable. But at their level, there was basically nothing that they couldn't talk about. The key was how important Tan Shilai was to Tan Qinghua. Tan Qinghua looked up at the young man in front of him and gradually narrowed his eyes. The extremely depressing atmosphere in the hall instantly became heavy. In less than 10 seconds, the young man's forehead was covered with cold sweat, and his calm expression gradually became embarrassed. He was just an ordinary lieutenant colonel. It was conceivable how much pressure he was under the gaze of a general. "Please tell Commander Ning for me." Tan Qinghua finally opened his mouth and said faintly, "I will focus on the overall situation after I avenge my son." The young lieutenant colonel's expression changed. Looking at Tan Qinghua's eyes that were gradually becoming crazy, he finally chose to remain silent. "Changjiang, where is the murderer?" Tan Qinghua suddenly stood up and looked at Gu Changjiang beside him and asked, "Yonghua Villa." Gu Changjiang was stunned and answered subconsciously, "Raging fire." As soon as Gu Changjiang finished his words, Tan Qinghua suddenly raised his voice and shouted, "Here!" Outside the villa, a loud voice sounded. The door was pushed open, and a burly man with a scar on his face appeared at the door and saluted Tan Qinghua. Tan Qinghua said coldly, "Gather people. The destination is Yonghua Villa. Bring the murderer back to me." He clenched his hands and added, "At all costs." "Yes." The scarred man with the code name Raging Fire saluted and turned to go out without hesitation. "Commander Tan." The young lieutenant colonel, who had been silent, changed his face and said in a low voice, "Do you know what you are doing?" "I am avenging my son." Tan Qinghua's tone was cold. "Tell Ning Ziyuan that if he has a different opinion, he can stop my people and see if he has the guts." The young lieutenant colonel's face changed. After a while, he snorted coldly and turned to leave quickly. He was just Ning Ziyuan's secretary and could not make any decisions for Ning Ziyuan. Now that things had come to this point, he must report Tan Qinghua's actions to Ning Ziyuan as soon as possible. Old Tan, calm down. Things are not simple tonight. Gu Changjiang came behind Tan Qinghua and said in a low voice. This time, the maneuver between the Eastern Theater of Operations and Huiting Special Operations Bureau was not large. About 2,000 elites from the Eastern Theater of Operations came. Although the number was not large, their comprehensive quality was the top 2,000 people in the entire Eastern Theater of Operations. Among these people, Tan Qinghua could fully command about 300 people. Once these 300 people rushed into Yonghua Villa, things were likely to develop to the point of no return. Everything looked a little chaotic tonight. Tan Qinghua's rash actions might not have an optimistic result. I can't calm down. Tan Qinghua glanced at Gu Changjiang and said calmly, Changjiang, I know your difficulties, so I won't embarrass you. But don't stop me. I will kill whoever kills my son. I will kill whoever dares to stop me. Crazy. Tan Qinghua was crazy. Gu Changjiang's brain was buzzing. He frowned tightly and felt powerless. Tan Qinghua ignored Gu Changjiang. He just bent down slightly, held his son's body in his arms, and went straight upstairs. Gu Changjiang stood where he was in a daze. After a long while, he took out a cigarette and lit it. He took a big drag, but his mind became more and more confused. Tan Shilai's body was sent back by Gu Yulan. Time was pressing, so he only had a brief understanding of what had happened. Not to mention the development of the matter, the people involved tonight were enough to make people feel that the inside story of this matter was complicated. Zhuang Huayang, Qin Weibai, Wang Yuatong, Ning Chenqing, Li Beitian, and Li Tianlan. Gu Changjiang was not familiar with Li Tianlan, but it was too obvious what the others meant. The academics, the Wang family of Beihai, the giant group, Mount Shu, and the mysterious Samsara Palace. Especially the foreign force Samsara Palace. Although its development in Zhongzhou State had been resisted by Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai, Zhongzhou State had cooperated with Samsara Palace several times in recent years, and they had been very happy. Now Qin Weibai, who had a special status in Samsara Palace, appeared as Li Tianlan's woman. It was said that she even forced He Qingting, the mad dog of the Zhong family, to kneel on the spot. Did Qin Weibai suddenly become so strong? Gu Changjiang had a headache. He felt that a storm was coming to Huiting, and there was a dark cloud hanging over the city overnight. Suddenly, the phone rang. Gu Changjiang took out his mobile phone and looked at the caller ID. Suddenly, he felt refreshed. After picking up the phone, he respectfully called the governor. There were two extremely prominent governors in Zhongzhou State, but only one could make Gu Changjiang so respectful. Gu Xingyun, the god of war of Zhongzhou State and the governor of Kunlun City. Huiting is very lively tonight? Gu Xingyun's voice sounded on the phone. His voice was light, and no one could tell his mood. It's more than lively. Gu Changjiang said with a wry smile. It's a mess. The boy of the Ning family killed Tan Shilai, and the youngest son of the Zhong family, Zhong Xiaofeng, was disabled by a man named Li Tianlan. It hasn't been long, and all kinds of bad guys have jumped out one by one. Old Tan is also crazy. A few minutes ago, he was ready to gather people to take revenge. It's really chaotic. Gu Xingyun chuckled and said lightly, but it's good. Gu Changjiang was silent for a while. It's good? The chaos in Huiting was indeed not a bad thing for Kunlun City. But the current chaos was not caused by Kunlun City. In this way, the muddy waters of Huiting were shallow, and they were not sure. Would it really be in the interests of Kunlun City to get into the water rashly? You go and have a look. Gu Xingyun seemed to think for a moment, and then said slowly, listen more and talk less. Wait and see. Yes. Gu Changjiang answered in a deep voice, and then said in a low voice, Governor, should we make early preparations? Gu Xingyun was silent for a while. After half a minute, he said with a smile, the preparations have been made for a long time, but there's no rush to take action. The situation of Huiting depends on the Zhong family. Tan Qinghua alone can't make it. Let's wait and see first. Gu Changjiang said yes and hung up the phone. He stood on the spot and smoked a cigarette, then walked out of the villa directly. At 12 o'clock at night. In the brightly lit base of Huiting Special Operations Bureau, 7 or 8 military trucks roared out of the gate of the base and rushed into the deep night outside the base. Tan Qinghua, who had originally asked the guard Lai Hua to lead the team to catch those people, changed his mind at the last minute. He put his son's body in his bedroom and personally led the team to Yonghua Villa. In the number 1 villa area, the 9th building was quiet. In the number 7 villa where Ning Ziyuan, the commander of the Eastern Theater of Operations, was also quiet. Chapter 62. When they got back to the downtown area and approached Yonghua Villa, Li Beitian and others couldn't believe that they got down from Mount Tong so easily. Li Tianlan didn't think it was a big deal. After all, he didn't know much about the Six in Jianghu State and didn't know the strength of the Six. In his view, Zhuang Huayang, an important figure in the academics, had shown up in person. Plus Qin Weibai, the spokesperson of a big shot. It would be a piece of cake to bring them down. But Li Beitian didn't think so. Not only him, but Ning Chenqing and Wang Yuetong all looked serious along the way. Obviously, they thought it was abnormal that they got down from the mountain so easily. The Prince Group was the last ruling group. Now it was the 3rd year of the general change, and it hadn't reached the midterm change yet. During this period, the Prince Group could be said to be in its heyday. On paper, it was even stronger than the current ruling group, the academics. Zhong Yongming of the Zhong family was currently the most promising figure to become the new leader of the Prince Group. His favorite youngest son was disabled, so it wouldn't be surprising for this power figure to react violently. But everything was calm tonight, and Zhong Yongming didn't even show up. This matter was obviously a little too abnormal. Such abnormality could only mean that the Zhong family's subsequent revenge would be more brutal. The top leader of Huiting was different from other senior officials. Historically, the top leader of Huiting had to enter the decision-making committee. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was the leader of the whole Zhongzhou state. Zhongzhou state had the largest bureaucratic system in the world, but there were no more than 20 members in the decision-making committee, including several power giants. This was the real top authority. If such a person insisted on retaliating against someone, there would be no place for him in Zhongzhou state, not to mention Huiting. The Zhong family's unusual calm tonight didn't mean safety, but a more dangerous follow-up. What are you thinking about? The atmosphere doesn't feel right. Zhuang Huayang sat in the car and felt the solemn atmosphere in the car. He suddenly smiled and said in a relaxed tone. They were now sitting in the car heading for Yonghua Villa. Except for Han Xinyan and Zhang Holong, everyone else was there. The car was extended, more than 6 meters long, and the seats were arranged vertically facing each other. The space was very large, and it was not a problem to seat a few more people. After taking Li Tianlan and others down from Mount Tong, Zhuang Huayang's original intention was to take these excellent freshmen back to the Sky Academy. Everything that happened tonight was a big trouble anywhere. Only the Sky Academy was safe. Zhuang Huayang was one of the top 10 contemporary experts in Zhongzhou State, and he was also the headmaster of the Sky Academy. It was not easy for Zhong Yongming or Tan Qinghua to take revenge easily. At most, they could only instigate some students to take revenge. With the strength of Li Tianlan and others, Zhuang Huayang did not have to worry too much. However, Qin Weibai didn't want Li Tianlan to go back so early. Zhuang Huayang had lived for so long, so he could see that the young couple was in love now. It was reasonable that they didn't want to separate. So after a little hesitation, he accepted Qin Weibai's suggestion and came to Yonghua Villa. Qin Weibai was backed by the Samsara Palace. The Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City could be said to be vigilant against this mysterious foreign force. Even the government of Zhongzhou State did not welcome their development in the country. But in the past few years, the Samsara Palace did solve some things that were difficult for Zhongzhou State to do. No matter which group it was, they had to show some respect to the Samsara Palace. Even if the Zhong family and the Tan family went crazy for revenge, there were still 2 or 3 supermasters following Qin Weibai from the Samsara Palace. If they really fought, Qin Weibai would not be at a disadvantage. This was probably why she had the confidence to keep Li Tianlan and the others. But Zhuang Huayang was still a little worried, so he got in the car with them. He couldn't be blamed for being cautious. The chips Li Tianlan threw out were too lethal. When he was on the phone with the bureau chief, he threw out the chips Li Tianlan gave. The bureau chief, who had always been calm, sounded as if he didn't know who Zhong Yongming was at all. He ordered Zhuang Huayang to protect Li Tianlan and almost sent his guards over. Zhuang Huayang naturally knew why. A 17-year-old thunder-shocking realm expert represented too many things. Under normal circumstances, no matter how talented a person was, it was impossible for him to reach the thunder-shocking realm at the age of 17. It wasn't because he didn't have enough talent, but because the physical strength of a 17-year-old couldn't accommodate the power of the thunder-shocking realm. Martial artists had high or low talent, but their physical strength was almost the same. At least, before the human bones and muscles were completely formed, that was, before the age of 20, no one could bear the powerful power of the thunder-shocking realm. Before adulthood, even if one had the talent to enter the thunder-shocking realm, once he entered the thunder-shocking realm, the extreme power would instantly destroy the relatively tender bones and muscles of the martial artist, unless the physical strength of the martial artist had reached the requirement of the power of the thunder-shocking realm. According to some confidential information of Jianghu state, in the past 100 years, the earliest martial artist to reach the thunder-shocking realm was 23 years old, which was after the muscles and bones were completely formed. Coincidentally, the person who kept this record was also from Zhuanyuantai of Kunlun. He was the god of war of Jianghu state 200 years ago. It was extremely difficult to improve the physical strength effectively and quickly, but it was not absolute. At least when Zhuang Huayang was young, he once heard from a big shot who had passed away that there was a legendary essence of martial arts in the map of god of war inherited from Zhuanyuantai of Kunlun, which could improve the physical strength relatively quickly. No one had seen the true face of that essence, but it was said that it was the essence that several gods of war of Jianghu state from Zhuanyuantai of Kunlun commented with a wry smile as the strongest and most useless essence. That essence was called the Invincible Manual. Zhuang Huayang did not know what was so useless about the Invincible Manual, but he knew what the word strongest meant in Zhuanyuantai of Kunlun. Li Tianlan, who practiced the Invincible Manual, entered the thunder-shocking realm at the age of 17, which was enough to explain the problem. Once such a person entered the invincible realm in the future, and he even had the wind and thunder veins, what would happen? Protect Li Tianlan to the death. When saying this, the chief did not hesitate at all. This was almost the consensus of the whole academics. So feeling the atmosphere in the car at this time, Zhuang Huayang smiled again and said, "Don't worry, it's okay." His eyes glanced around and finally stopped on Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai. It was a very spacious car, but Qin Weibai was half leaning in Li Tianlan's arms. The two were very close to each other, and they seemed to be whispering. Zhuang Huayang felt helpless. Looking at the two little lovers, they were not worried at all. It seemed that only Li Beitian and the others were worried. "Headmaster, the reaction of the Zhong family tonight is too abnormal. Something is not right." Ning Qianqing leaned on the seat and coughed. He did not know what the powder Li Tianlan poured into his mouth was, but how could it be ordinary if it was carried by the little princess of the Wang family? So now, Ning Qianqing's injury had stabilized. Although there was still a long way to go before he could fully recover, at least he could move slowly. "I think so too." Wang Yuetong frowned and said, "Zhong Xiaofeng is very important in the Zhong family. Among Zhong Yongming's 3 children, the eldest one is dedicated to business. Although his daughter has entered the officialdom, she is still a daughter. Zhong Yongming has always regarded Zhong Xiaofeng as the political successor of the Zhong family. But now such a big thing has happened, and Zhong Yongming can be so calm. He doesn't show up himself, and even his secretary doesn't show up. This is too strange. Today is the 30th, right?" Qin Weibai, who was leaning in Li Tianlan's arms, suddenly said in a somewhat lazy tone. Wang Yuetong was stunned. She seemed to understand something, but she did not speak. She just pursed her lips and turned her head. "The 30th?" Li Beitian and Ning Qianqing were stunned at the same time. Then they nodded and said, "It's the end of the month." No wonder. For most people, the end of the month was not unusual. But for the top officials, if there were no particularly important foreign affairs or other arrangements, Jianghu State would hold a plenary meeting of the decision-making committee at the end of each month and at the beginning of each month. As a member of the decision-making committee of Jianghu State, Zhong Yongming would definitely go to Yuzhou for the meeting if there were no other important matters. That was to say, Zhong Yongming was not in Huiting at all these days. What a coincidence. Li Beitian was silent for a while and said with a smile, "Then we are safe, aren't we? Zhong Yongming will come back in 2 or 3 days. What can he do to us when we enter the Sky Academy? It's not fun to be a coward. We can't hide in the Sky Academy forever, can we?" Li Tianlan, who had been paying attention to Qin Weibai, suddenly opened his mouth. He was talking to Li Beitian, but his eyes inadvertently glanced at Zhuang Huayang. Zhuang Huayang was calm and silent. He understood what Li Tianlan meant, but it was not convenient for him to express his position. The academic's influence on Huiting was relatively weak. Even if he wanted to do something, he could not do anything. Now his bottom line was to protect Li Tianlan. As for what to do next, it depended on the development of the situation. If there was a chance, the academics would not be polite. It's not the right time to talk about this, Qin Weibai suddenly said with a soft and calm expression. The trouble has just begun. The Zhong family's revenge will come sooner or later, and we can't avoid it. But because Zhong Yongming is not in Huiting now, we can let him calm down during this period. As long as Zhong Xiaofeng is not dead, there is room for negotiation. At least there is some hope for a superficial reconciliation. Before Zhong Yongming comes back, we should guard against Tan Qinghua. Tan Qinghua. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and repeated the name. Indeed, now it seemed that Tan Qinghua's possible reaction was the key. Although Zhuang Huayang did not say it at Mount Tong, Li Tianlan could see that he was a little nervous. Later, he asked him and found out that Zhuang Huayang was also worried about Tan Qinghua's reaction. Compared with Zhong Xiaofeng's status in the Zhong family, Tan Xilai's status in the Tan family was higher. It was said that Tan Qinghua had high hopes for him, but he was killed by Ning Qianqing tonight. Who knew what the military hardliners would do? It was said that 2,000 elites of the Eastern Theater of Operations were now in Huiting, preparing for the maneuver with the Special Operations Bureau in Huiting in a few days. If Tan Qinghua insisted on revenge, he could surround Mount Tong with his men, and even Zhuang Huayang would find it difficult to deal with him. Li Tianlan lit a cigarette and thought about it. How will Tan Qinghua react? He subconsciously glanced at Ning Qianqing and subconsciously shook his head at the thought of the grudge between him and the Tan family. How will a man who can endure being cuckolded react? Will Zhong Yongming and Tan Qinghua reach a tacit understanding? Li Tianlan suddenly asked. Tonight's events were two things, but there was nothing wrong with linking them together. Zhong Yongming was now in Yuzhou for a meeting, but Tan Qinghua was in Huiting. For them, the murderers were all in the same gang. If the two reached a tacit understanding, it could almost represent the military and political sides of Huiting to a certain extent. Tan Qinghua was the deputy commander of the Eastern Theater of Operations. The headquarters of the Eastern Theater of Operations was in Jinling, but Huiting was also under the jurisdiction of the Eastern Theater of Operations. The Tan family was originally one of the wealthy families that entered Huiting with the Zhong family, and had a great influence in the military of Huiting. Once the two reached a tacit understanding, who knew what would happen? Li Tianlan subconsciously glanced at Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai's delicate face was also a little hesitant, but she did not say anything. Boss Qin, you brought us here tonight. You must have a countermeasure, right? Zhuang Huayang suddenly asked. We'll deal with whatever comes our way. Everything will be fine after a few days. Qin Weibai moved in Li Tianlan's arms and said flatly. What if we can't get through these days? Zhuang Huayang stared at Qin Weibai and asked. This young girl seemed to be a little too confident. Now the six would indeed give Samsara Palace some face, but giving face did not mean a bottomless compromise. Samsara Palace had almost no power in Zhongzhou State. Once the Prince Group insisted on attacking Li Tianlan and joined forces with Kunlun City, how could Qin Weibai protect Li Tianlan? If they ignored the Samsara Palace that could not enter Zhongzhou State, Qin Weibai could hardly do anything. Qin Weibai sat up straight and glanced at Zhuang Huayang. Her voice was still calm and languid. She said softly, Samsara is nothing in Zhongzhou State, but the deputy commander of the Eastern Theater of Operations cannot trample on its dignity. The corner of Li Baitian's mouth twitched quietly. He secretly glanced at Qin Weibai and did not dare to say anything. Who could have thought that this little woman, who looked calm and harmless at this time, was so powerful on the mountain just now? Faced with hundreds of policemen, she was the first to use her gun and the first to shoot. No one believed that Qin Weibai dared to shoot, not even He Qingting, the deputy director of Huiting Police Station, whose head was pointed at by her with a gun. So when Qin Weibai asked her to kneel down, she just sneered and said, shoot if you can. Then Qin Weibai did shoot. Without saying a word, she directly pulled the trigger at her head. Without the slightest bit of hesitation, He was so decisive that everyone was dumbfounded. At the critical moment, if Qing Ting had not knelt down because she felt that Qin Weibai's finger was really pulling the trigger, the shot pointed at her head would have completely blown her head off. Even so, the shot brushed past her scalp. It was a brush with death. Deputy Director He, who was kneeling on the ground to avoid the bullet, could not say a word at that time. With her head full of blood, she just knelt on the ground and did not dare to move for a long time, as if she was scared silly. Li Beitian had lived for so many years, but it was the first time that he saw such a domineering woman. A pure queen. Li Tianlan disabled Zhong Xiaofeng because of a word. Qin Weibai dared to kill He Qingting because of a word. Chapter 63. The limousine drove into the Yonghua Villa district and finally stopped at the gate of Qin Weibai's detached villa. They got out of the car one by one. When they walked into the villa, Qin Weibai looked back at Li Beitian and Ning Qianqing, and then at Wang Yuetong with a playful look. She said softly, "The guest rooms on the second floor are ready. You can choose any room you like." She looked at Zhuang Huayang again and continued, "Headmaster, if you don't mind, how about spending the night here?" "I'm fine with you." Zhuang Huayang nodded with a smile and looked at Li Tianlan. This guy was the treasure of the academics now, and he was really worried about leaving him here. "Then I'll go to rest with Tianlan." Qin Weibai glanced at Wang Yuetong intentionally or unintentionally, and then reached out to hold Li Tianlan's arm with a smile that seemed to melt people's hearts. Wang Yuetong bit her lip and said nothing. Li Beitian whistled and let out a strange laugh. It was a meaningful one. "Laugh your ass," Li Tianlan scolded with a smile. He felt uncomfortable under Wang Yuetong's gaze and went upstairs with Qin Weibai. "Your friends are quite interesting." Qin Weibai took Li Tianlan's arm and walked up the stairs. She chuckled and said, "Ning Qianqing and Li Taishu, these two people can at least reach the peak of the thunder-shocking realm in the future. They are the real right-hand men. Who knows what will happen in the future?" Li Tianlan smiled and suddenly asked, "Why did you go to Mount Tong tonight?" "I got the news and rushed there. I happened to meet Zhuang Huayang on the way, so we went up the mountain together." Li Tianlan didn't ask how she got the news. He just reached out and touched her head. Qin Weibai seemed a little dissatisfied. She held Li Tianlan's hand and said, "What? Do you think I'm a child? I'm older than you. You have to call me sister, okay?" They had done the most intimate thing. In front of Qin Weibai, Li Tianlan really had nothing to hide. He kissed Qin Weibai's face hard and said with a low smile, "Why didn't you let me call you sister when you called me husband last night?" "Rogue, don't say it." Qin Weibai's face was rosy, and her beauty was dazzling. She pushed Li Tianlan to the chair next to her. Li Tianlan put his arms around her and pulled her into his arms. "Stop fooling around." Qin Weibai giggled and stood up. She blushed and said softly, "I made you supper. Are you hungry? Would you like to join us?" Li Tianlan said. There was a small dining table in front of him. It was not big, but it was exquisite and delicate. It was probably the place where Qin Weibai usually had her supper, because one of the chairs was obviously just moved here. Li Tianlan patted the table and said, "Where are Beitian and the others?" "There's food downstairs. They won't get hungry." After saying that, Qin Weibai went downstairs directly. After a while, she came up with a tray. The items on the tray were also very simple. There were 2 bowls of porridge and a few plates of pickled vegetables. They looked refreshing and delicious. Qin Weibai sat down opposite Li Tianlan and said with a smile, "Eat something light tonight, or it's not good for your stomach." Li Tianlan nodded and took a sip of the porridge. He felt that it was especially delicious. "Delicious." Li Tianlan smiled and said softly, "What's inside?" "Shiitake mushrooms, lean meat, and vegetables. I cooked it for a few hours. Eat more if you like it. There's more downstairs." Qin Weibai stared at Li Tianlan's face and said. Li Tianlan nodded and looked at the porridge in front of him, lost in thought. "I didn't like porridge very much before." He was silent for a full 5 minutes before he suddenly opened his mouth and said in a self-mocking tone, "There are very few people who like to eat porridge in a place like ours. There was no electricity in our campsite, so we had to burn a fire to cook. There was a lot of food, but most of it was piled up all year round. It was hot there, so the rice would sometimes go moldy and turn yellow or even black. There was a river near the campsite. The water was drinkable, but it was not clean and a little muddy. The porridge cooked with that kind of water and that kind of rice really didn't taste good. But it could keep people from getting hungry, so I had to make do with it. I'm not afraid that you'll laugh at me. When I was a child, I was about 4 or 5 years old. I cried every time I ate. If I didn't eat, I would get hungry. If I was hungry, I would cry. If I ate bad food, I would still cry. I started to practice martial arts when I was 5 years old. When I was 8, the rice in the campsite was very moldy. The rice was black, and the porridge was black and smelled fishy. It tasted worse than medicine. I trained hard at that time and ate 5 or 6 meals a day. Basically, it was that kind of black porridge. I vomited after eating it, and then I ate it again. I ate it for about a month. Since then, I've been traumatized. Every time I eat porridge, I feel uncomfortable. Later, I couldn't stand it anymore, so I went hunting. When there were more people in the campsite, there were more animals. When there were fewer people in the campsite and there were no animals nearby, I could even catch a snake as a big meal. I often got nothing from hunting. When I was hungry, I even gnawed on tree barks and grass roots. I really didn't want to eat those moldy things. At that time, I thought that if I could really get out one day, I would absolutely not eat porridge or steamed bread. I would eat meat for every meal and nothing else. When I came to Huiting, the first meal I had was with you and Senior You. It was the most comfortable meal I've ever had. Later, I ate the porridge you cooked. It smelled so good, so damn good. I fell in love with it the first time I had it. Even now, every time I eat, I'm very surprised. So now I can't even adapt to eating, let alone adapt to Jianghu state. Every time I look at these food, it's like a dream. Li Tianlan's voice gradually became lower. Finally, he looked at the bowl of porridge in front of him and murmured, "How many years has it been since Grandpa and those veterans tasted such a bowl of porridge?" Qin Weibai reached out and grabbed Li Tianlan's hand. Her eyes became softer and softer. She said softly, "Do you miss them?" "Yes, even in my dreams. I can't wait to bring them to Huiting now. I want them to see the prosperity now, and I want Grandpa to see you, his granddaughter-in-law." Li Tianlan smiled. Qin Weibai blinked and deliberately diverted Li Tianlan's attention. She said with a smile, "Granddaughter-in-law? I'm not the granddaughter-in-law in your grandpa's heart. In any case, I won't let him be satisfied." Li Tianlan was stunned. His originally gloomy mood also became confused. "What do you mean?" Qin Weibai deliberately guided Li Tianlan's mood. She sat opposite him and said with a smile, "Do you know why I don't let you go back to the Sky Academy with Zhuang Huayang? I just want to give some people a chance. Since you entered the school, you've performed so well. Some people have been waiting for so many years. I guess they can't sit still anymore." Li Tianlan was still at a loss. "Fool." Qin Weibai gently glared at Li Tianlan and said in a soft tone, "Didn't your grandpa tell you? You have an engagement. Have you forgotten? The person you will marry in the future is her." When she said this, Qin Weibai's expression was calm and gentle, but her eyes were a little complicated. Li Tianlan's heart trembled slightly. He subconsciously shook his head and said in a firm tone, "I only want you. Marry me?" Qin Weibai blinked her eyes and smiled sweetly. "Marry you?" Li Tianlan said resolutely and without any hesitation. "The engagement can't stop me. Grandpa can't stop me. No one can." Qin Weibai looked at Li Tianlan in a daze and did not speak for a long time. Li Tianlan's face seemed to be a little hot, but he hesitated and said, "In my heart, only you are the most perfect." Clatter. Qin Weibai suddenly reached out and directly swept all the things on the table in front of her under the table. The porridge and pickles fell on the ground in a mess. She stood up and put her hands on the table. She lifted her long and straight legs one by one. Under Li Tianlan's somewhat dull gaze, she climbed directly onto the table and climbed toward him. Li Tianlan swallowed hard. Qin Weibai's face was red. She was obviously a little shy to do this kind of thing for the first time, but she did not have the slightest intention to stop. She climbed over the table and sat directly in Li Tianlan's arms, her eyes like silk. At this moment, Qin Weibai could be said to be extremely charming, wild, and sexy. Li Tianlan breathed quickly and held Qin Weibai's body tightly. The hot blood rushed and washed away his reason, making him almost completely crazy. Chapter 64. Stepping into the corridor on the second floor, Li Beitian began to sigh as soon as he entered the room. His long and short sighs looked really miserable. Ning Qianqing was seriously injured, but if he didn't fight, he could move slowly. He followed Li Beitian in, frowned slightly and said, "What the hell are you screaming for?" F***CKU. This is called melancholy. Melancholy. Do you understand? Li Beitian rolled his eyes. Looking at the large and soft bed in the room, he sighed again and shook his head. Look at Tianlan, hugging the first beauty of Huiting to sleep tonight, and then look at us? We're F***king sharing the same bed. Gay love is everywhere. The gap between us is too big. Ning Qianqing's mouth twitched. He didn't think much at first, but after hearing Li Beitian's words, he suddenly felt that the big bed in front of him was an eyesore. He shook his head and sat on the bed. He glanced at Li Beitian and said with a smile, "What? Envy, jealousy, and hatred?" "Of course I am." Li Beitian sighed and said, "Didn't you see it on the mountain? She really shot me. If there is a woman like her who protects me at all costs, I'll be satisfied. But I'm not jealous. I haven't seen Qin Weibai before, but I've heard of her. I've heard a lot about her. Today, I know it's not an exaggeration. Beautiful. Too beautiful. That's not good." Ning Qianqing casually lay on the bed to rest. He was sober, but he felt dizzy and his body was a little weak. He pulled the quilt over and said with a smile, "Isn't it good to be beautiful? Are you looking for a girlfriend or a wife who is ugly?" Of course it's good to be beautiful, but it's not good to be too beautiful. Qin Weibai is a disaster. Think about it, with such a beautiful wife, after Tianlan has tasted her, will he still be interested in other women? A bunch of mediocre women. I guess he won't be interested in them. Sad, too damn sad. Ning Qianqing was silent. He wanted to say that what Li Beitian said was wrong, but after thinking about it carefully, he found that it did make sense. With Qin Weibai, other women were really mediocre. To have only one woman in a lifetime was a normal thing for many people, but in the eyes of some people, it was a bit scary. Wang Yuetong. Can't you eat it? Ning Qianqing thought for a moment and suddenly said. When they went upstairs just now, everyone could feel the irritation and even jealousy of the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai. When she entered her room and closed the door, the whole floor shook. It was terrifying. Although Ning Qianqing felt a little baffled, he was sure that the little princess was interested in Li Tianlan. The key was to see what Li Tianlan thought. In terms of charm, Qin Weibai might be unparalleled in the world, but even in front of Qin Weibai, Wang Yuetong was a real delicacy that could be devoured. Wang Yuetong? Isn't this too scary? It's not a question of whether I can do it or not. It's a question of whether I dare to do it. If I really do it, the Wang family of Beihai will tear Tianlan apart. Li Beitian was speechless. This is too crazy. Crazy your sister. Ning Qianqing kicked him. Stop gossiping and go to sleep. Li Beitian grunted but did not take off his clothes. He directly lay down on the bed. Ning Qianqing closed his eyes and planned to meditate. After tonight's battle, the fire-flaming realm was close at hand. If he could enter the state of meditation, he could successfully break through in half an hour at most. However, after trying for a long time, he still could not calm down. Ning Qianqing was not in a hurry. He closed his eyes and rested. Just as his consciousness was about to fade, Li Beitian suddenly stood up and said, "I'm really not used to sleeping in the same bed with a man. You sleep. I'll go downstairs for a walk." He laughed and said, "Didn't Qin Weibai ask the driver sister to wait downstairs? I'll go talk to her about my life ideals." Ning Qianqing, who was about to fall asleep, sneered and said, "Didn't you hear what Qin Weibai called her? That's horsewoman, one of the 12 supermasters of samsara. If you want to die, go ahead." "Do you think I'm scared?" Li Beitian chuckled and walked out. Woo! An ear-piercing siren suddenly sounded, cutting through the deep night outside the window. Li Beitian, who had not left the room, and Ning Qianqing, who was on the bed, were stunned at the same time. Before the two could speak, the shrill and piercing siren suddenly sounded. For a moment, it seemed that the siren was echoing in every corner of the entire Yonghua villa. Li Beitian and Ning Qianqing rushed to the window one after another and looked out. Outside the window, the police lights were flashing. Teams of policemen gathered in front of the villa and then quickly dispersed. In the blink of an eye, the entire villa was surrounded. Countless policemen with shields were at the forefront. At first glance, the front of the villa seemed to have become a sea of shields and helmets. How many people are there? Li Beitian subconsciously muttered to himself. Ning Qianqing did not speak. His gaze passed over the policemen in front of the villa and fell directly on the 7 or 8 military trucks behind the large group of policemen. The 7 or 8 military trucks stopped behind the large group of policemen. The doors opened, and teams of heavily armed soldiers jumped out of the trucks. Under the leadership of an aging middle-aged man, they went straight to the front door of the villa. Tan Qinghua. Ning Qianqing's pupils contracted slightly. His chest rose and fell as he breathed deeply. The policemen tacitly made way for the soldiers to pass. A middle-aged man with the title of Deputy Chief Police quickly walked to Tan Qinghua and saluted. Ning Qianqing, who saw this scene, narrowed his eyes and did not speak. "I'll go down and have a look." Li Beitian suddenly spoke with a serious expression. Ning Qianqing subconsciously looked at his watch and then said, "Let's go down together. What will come can't be avoided." The two looked at each other and walked out of the door together. They had thought that after leaving Mount Tong, both the Zhong family and the Tan family would calm down. At least there would be no trouble tonight. But they did not expect that they would act so quickly. What was going on outside? The police, armed police, special police, and the army appeared together, which also meant that the Zhong family and the Tan family had officially joined hands. In terms of time, the two sides had even reached an agreement at the first moment. Otherwise it would not have been so fast. Outside the villa, the siren had quieted down. Tan Qinghua, who had come to avenge his son in a military uniform, shook hands with the deputy chief police in front of him and said in a hoarse voice, "Director He, are you sure this is the place?" "Yes, the murderers who injured Zhong Xiaofeng and killed Tan Xilai are all here. Should we arrange someone to call them?" The deputy chief police let go of Tan Qinghua's hand. His tone was neither humble nor arrogant, but his eyes were extremely cold. "Don't bother. Just arrest them." Tan Xilai's expression was dull, but he was still polite to the deputy chief police in front of him. He said gently, "Director He, thank you for your hard work. We need your people to cooperate with us later." He Ping. He was one of the 11 standing committees of Huiting, the director of the Ministry of Politics and Law and the director of the Huiting Police Station, a capable general of the Prince Group, and one of Zhong Yongming's right-hand men in Huiting. He was the boss of Huiting's political and legal system and Tan Qinghua, the deputy commander of the Eastern Theater of Operations. The two core figures of the Prince Group were working together. Such a scale was enough to show how determined the Zhong family and the Tan family were at this time. They obviously did not intend to care about the reputation of the Samsara Palace. "My people will act with the comrades in the Eastern Theater of Operations. Secretary Zhong has instructed me to cooperate fully." He Ping nodded and said calmly. In fact, this senior official at the level of deputy governor was also very annoyed. He Qing Ting, the deputy director of the Huiting police station, was a mad dog raised by the Zhong family and also a confidant of He Ping. But in Mount Tong, she was forced to kneel by Qin Weibai. A dignified deputy director of the bureau knelt down. Not to mention the policemen present at that time, even he, the director of the Ministry of Politics and Law, felt ashamed. No matter how strong the Samsara Palace is, it is outside the country. This is Zhongzhou State. When you are respected, you are the distinguished guests of Zhongzhou State. When you are not respected, you are nothing. No matter how strong the palace master of the Samsara Palace is, she has not dared to enter Zhongzhou State for many years. Now there are 4 invincible realm experts in Zhongzhou State. How can the palace master of the Samsara Palace defeat them? A mere spokesperson of the palace master dared to force a senior official of Zhongzhou State to kneel. Where did Qin Weibai get such confidence? After He Qing Ting, who had lost all face, went back, He Ping directly scolded her. Then, after communicating with Zhong Yongming, he directly led a team to Yonghua Villa to arrest her. "I don't care whether you are Samsara or not. If I don't teach you a lesson, you will really think that this is outside the country. Commander Tan, rest assured, my people will cooperate fully with you." He Ping took a step back and said flatly. This was also Zhong Yongming's instruction. Seriously speaking, allies and his own people were naturally different, but there were also differences between his own people and himself. He Ping intended to teach a lesson to the Samsara Palace, which had no foundation in Zhongzhou state. But since Tan Qinghua was willing to test the waters first, He Ping naturally would not stand out. Tan Qinghua coughed, nodded slightly, and led his people forward. Behind him, 300 elites of the Eastern Theater of Operations followed suit and approached the door of the villa. The villa was quiet, and there was no response at all. Tan Qinghua slightly narrowed his eyes, opened the front door, and walked into the detached courtyard. Looking at the still quiet villa, he suddenly sneered and said without hesitation, "Raging fire, take Team 1 and Team 2 and go directly in to arrest them. Team 3 is responsible for guarding. Whoever dares to resist or escape, kill on the spot." His voice was cold and gloomy, clearly echoing in the small courtyard and into the villa. "Yes." Raging fire, the guard with a scar on his face who had been following him, subconsciously straightened his body. Behind him, 300 elites of the Eastern Theater of Operations pulled the bolts at the same time, and the crisp sound of metal hitting each other was uniform. The 300 elites were expressionless, and they were ready for battle. Raging fire looked back at them, slightly narrowed his eyes and waved his hand. "Team 1 and Team 2, follow me in." 200 people stepped out at the same time, followed Raging fire, and directly rushed to the door of the villa in a fighting posture. The dense and rapid footsteps were not messy at all. The scene of 200 elites moving forward in silence had an indescribable aggressiveness and impact. In Europe, trespassing on private property is a very dangerous thing. "Are you sure you want to do this?" A sexy voice with an exotic charm rang out. It was neither fast nor slow, sounding elegant and gentle, but an extremely dangerous aura instantly filled the entire courtyard. Raging fire, who was about to enter the villa, suddenly stopped in his tracks. Less than 5 centimeters away from his feet, a weak electric light shone. It looked gentle, but it spread wildly in the blink of an eye. There was a faint sound of thunder rolling across the sky. In an instant, the glaring electric light spread unscrupulously in the air, getting brighter and brighter, increasing in number, and finally connecting into a large area. The entire villa was almost surrounded by the electric light. Countless bright lines intertwined and flickered densely. The air was extremely distorted, and after the electric light, the villa became blurry. Raging fire stopped in his tracks. Facing the electric light that could easily turn him into a pile of charcoal, his expression was still calm. The 300 elites of the Eastern Theater of Operations were also expressionless. "This is Zhongzhou State." Tan Qinghua's face was livid under the large area of electric light. The corner of his mouth twitched and he said gloomily, "Who are you?" "Horsewoman of Samsara." A tall and sexy figure of a woman appeared at the gate of the villa. Through the electric light, her blonde hair danced wildly, and she looked dignified and holy. "Can you stop me?" Tan Shilai's tone was sarcastic. Of course, he had heard of horsewomen. Even among the 12 supermasters of Samsara, horsewoman ranked relatively high. She was at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, and her strength even surpassed the peak. It was indeed terrifying, but so what? This was Zhongzhou State. Even experts of the invincible realm outside the country did not dare to kill in Zhongzhou State. Tian Ling, who was shot to death by human emperor 15 years ago, was a living example. Tan Qinghua's eyes were cold. His son's murderer was in the villa. His patience was wearing thin, and he was getting more and more agitated. "I want to try." In front of the villa, horsewoman smiled gently, but the electric light in front of her fluctuated violently. "Then try, as long as you can bear the consequences." Tan Qinghua sneered, and suddenly raised his voice and roared, "Experts outside the country attack us in Zhongzhou State. They are invaders. Boys of the Eastern Theater of Operations, what should we do to invaders?" "Kill." After a short silence, hundreds of elites of the Eastern Theater of Operations roared at the top of their lungs. "Kill." Chapter 65. Attack. This was the only thought in Tan Qinghua's mind. The cooperation between Samsara Palace and Zhongzhou State in recent years was indeed pleasant, and they had established a relatively good friendship. However, there were too many variables in the friendship between a big country and a big force. Not to mention anything else, Jianghu state had never welcomed Samsara Palace to enter its territory to develop its own force, which was enough to show the subtle relationship between the two. As the spokesperson of the master of Samsara Palace, Qin Weibai was in Huiting, so Jianghu state could turn a blind eye. After all, when Jianghu state needed Samsara to contribute to something, it was the most convenient thing to contact Qin Weibai. Since Horsewoman, Flaming Fire, and the other supermasters of Samsara were in Huiting, Jianghu state could also turn a blind eye. But if the supermasters of Samsara attacked the soldiers of Jianghu state, it would be a taboo. If foreign experts attacked the army of Jianghu state, they were enemies and invaders. If Horsewoman really dared to attack the soldiers of the Eastern Theater of Operations, then the entire Jianghu state would become her enemy. None of the six could protect her, nor would they dare to. Protecting her was tantamount to treason. At that time, not only her, but also Flaming Fire, and even Qin Weibai would be uprooted. There was no second possibility. Tan Qinghua was well aware of the consequences, and he believed that Horsewoman also knew. Therefore, although the lightning in front of him was gorgeous, in his eyes, Horsewoman was completely bluffing. Tan Qinghua's eyes were cold. He was not in the mood to play any psychological tactics with Horsewoman. Whether Horsewoman was pretending or really crazy, he did not intend to compromise. Ning Qianqing must die. Who dares to move? A deep and old voice suddenly sounded at the door. In everyone's sight, Zhuang Huayang, the headmaster of the Sky Academy, also in a military uniform with the rank of general, appeared in front of the door. Li Beitian and Ning Qianqing stood on both sides of him. Tan Qinghua, who had been calm, suddenly became ferocious the moment he saw Ning Qianqing. He stared at Ning Qianqing. In his eyes, besides coldness, there was only a kind of naked hatred and brutality. Headmaster Zhuang, what do you mean? Tan Qinghua's tone was cold. His eyes seemed to be completely fixed on Ning Qianqing and refused to move away. Zhuang Huayang casually glanced at Horsewoman. The knight hesitated for a moment before waving his hand. There was a slight fluctuation in the air, and the lightning that had shrouded the entire villa instantly disappeared. I'd like to ask what Commander Tan means. The life-and-death duel between Tan Shilai and Ning Qianqing is a normal internal competition of our Sky Academy. Commander's reaction is so extreme. Are you trying to trample on the rules of our academy? Zhuang Huayang took a step to the side, intentionally or unintentionally, and stood in front of Ning Qianqing, staring at Tan Qinghua as he asked. He killed my son. Tan Qinghua said in an old-fashioned tone, I have to bring him back. As he spoke, Lai Hua and the 300 elites from the Eastern Battle Zone took a step forward at the same time. The sound of their footsteps landing on the ground rang clearly in the courtyard. Dull and clear. This is an internal matter of our Sky Academy. Since the commander chose to send Tan Shilai to the Sky Academy, you should have made such preparations. I'm sorry, you can't take Qianqing away. After the internal study of the Sky Academy, you will be given an explanation. Zhuang Huayang said coldly. At this moment, the old headmaster, who always seemed to smile at everyone and seemed to have no temper at all, was expressionless. His words were filled with an indescribable strength and determination. I can't take him away? The corners of Tan Qinghua's mouth rose. A grim smile gradually spread on his face and became more and more obvious. He suddenly pulled his collar and roared, I don't want an explanation from your Sky Academy today. I must take Ning Qianqing away. You can't stop me. No one can stop me. He Ping, the director of the political and legal department of Huiting, who had been following behind Tan Qinghua, frowned slightly. Tan Qinghua could do anything in the face of Horsewoman, but it was a bit difficult to deal with Zhuang Huayang, who was also a general of the military. He couldn't treat Zhuang Huayang as a foreign expert, could he? Seeing that things were going to be awkward, He Ping coughed and suddenly said with a smile, Headmaster, I'm here to take away a young man named Li Tianlan. He injured Secretary Zhong's son, Zhong Xiaofeng. The Municipal Public Security Bureau wants to take him back to the Bureau for investigation. Headmaster, this is not an internal matter of the Sky Academy, is it? Bullshit. Zhuang Huayang sneered. Looking at He Ping's suddenly embarrassed face, he said mercilessly, Li Tianlan is also a freshman of the Sky Academy. If this is not our internal matter, then what is it? We deal with our own students. This is the rule. If you want to break the rule, you can try. I've been in the special warfare system for so many years. Although I didn't do well, as the headmaster of the Sky Academy, I still have to uphold the rules of the academy. I'll make it clear today. You, Tan Qinghua, can't take Ning Qianqing away. You, He Ping, can't take Li Tianlan away either. Zhuang Huayang. Tan Qinghua's face suddenly turned red. His emotions were almost completely out of control. He roared angrily, I'm going to take the murderer away today. Let's see what you can do. Domineering. No wonder you're the deputy commander of the Eastern Theater of Operations. You're really domineering. Before Zhuang Huayang could respond, a casual male voice rang from behind Tan Qinghua. With a strong smile, the voice did not care about Tan Qinghua's current feelings at all. When I was a child, my brother told me that the strongest fist is the last word. Old Tan, old Zhuang, what's the use of you two dawdling for a long time? Just fight. Old Zhuang is not weak. Old Tan, you have hundreds of elites under your command. So many policemen are not to be trifled with. Anyway, you're in a hurry to take revenge. Fight first and talk later. You don't need to think about the consequences, do you? Tan Qinghua frowned and looked back with a sullen face. In his sight, a young man in beige casual clothes walked over lazily with his hands in his pockets, ignoring all the policemen present. The young man was tall and handsome. When he smiled, he seemed to be full of a modest and gentle temperament. He was harmless and made people feel very comfortable. Zhuang Huayang glanced at him and raised his eyebrows slightly. He was calm and collected. Tan Qinghua's body tensed up and he said attentively, What are you doing here? Wang Xiaoyao. King Xiaoyao of the Wang family of Beihai. For anyone, this was a figure that needed to be taken seriously. Even if he did not have any official position, the core high level of the Wang family of Beihai was enough to be on an equal footing with most people. I'm here to watch the fun. Wang Xiaoyao walked over with a smile, patted Tan Qinghua on the shoulder, and said with a smile, I heard that your son is dead? Congratulations. Wang Xiaoyao. Tan Qinghua slapped Wang Xiaoyao's palm away and flew into a rage. A slip of the tongue. Don't mind me. Old Tan, you have a bad temper and can't take a joke. I know you're angry, but don't take it out on me. I came here in a hurry. I won't stop you from taking revenge. I just have something to discuss with you. Wang Xiaoyao replied a few times, still looking careless and tired. But because of his arrival, the atmosphere at the scene became more and more subtle. Say it. Tan Qinghua looked at Wang Xiaoyao coldly and squeezed a word out of his teeth. Well, it's just a small matter. Wang Xiaoyao lit a cigarette, and the smoke unscrupulously sprayed onto Tan Qinghua's face. He narrowed his eyes and pointed to the villa in front of him with a smile. I won't stop you from taking revenge, but there are two people in this villa that I care about the most. My niece Yuetong and Qin Weibai. I won't stop you from killing anyone tonight, but if anything happens to these two people, I'll kill your whole family. Old Tan, do you believe me? Creak. Tan Qinghua clenched his teeth so hard that they almost broke. Don't gnash your teeth. Wang Xiaoyao flicked the cigarette ash and said lightly, You should know me. This is not a threat. I mean what I say. He glanced around and was a little confused. He did not see Li Tianlan, who made him extremely uncomfortable, nor did he see Qin Weibai. Wang Xiaoyao felt strange. He looked at Horsewoman and said with a smile, Horsewoman, where's your boss? Tut-tut, it's so lively. Wang Xiaoyao is here too. Old Tan looks a little excited. I really don't know what will happen tonight. If there is a conflict, I'm afraid the situation in Huiting will completely explode. On the rooftop of a tall building less than 200 meters away from Yonghua Villa, under the deep night, Gu Changjiang, the director of Huiting Special Operations Bureau, watched what was happening in front of Yonghua Villa through binoculars. He suddenly said, Yulan, what do you think is the probability of Old Tan taking action? Beside Gu Changjiang, the petite and hot Gu Yulan hesitated and said softly, Tan Qinghua is emotionally unstable now. It's possible for him to do anything. It's possible for him to do anything. Gu Changjiang held the binoculars and said to himself again, It's possible for him to do anything. He sighed softly for the friendship between him and Tan Qinghua, and also for their different positions. Let's not talk about this. Gu Changjiang put down the binoculars and said gently, Yulan, what do you think of what happened tonight? Gu Yulan was the last disciple of Gu Qianchuan, the first elder of Kunlun City. She was an absolutely important figure among the young generation of Kunlun City. Gu Chongjiang must pay attention to her opinion. Li Tianlan must die. Gu Yulan was silent for a while. She thought of Li Tianlan's decisiveness and ruthlessness when he disabled Zhong Xiaofeng, his madness when he took the initiative to provoke, and his calmness and indifference. She felt a chill in her heart for no reason. Li Tianlan was too calm. He was so calm that he didn't look like a human. At this moment, all she could think of was the scene when Li Tianlan slowly crushed Zhong Xiaofeng's foot. At that time, Li Tianlan laughed coldly and cruelly, but his eyes were as calm as a glacier. He was so calm that no murderous intent could be seen, as if he was casually stepping on an ant. He was definitely a madman who disregarded life to the extreme. If this madman with infinite potential didn't die, Kunlun City would never have a comfortable life in the future. Li Tianlan. Gu Chongjiang narrowed his eyes slightly, picked up the binoculars again, and said with a smile, "I didn't see him. Where is he now?" What Gu Chongjiang didn't expect, what Wang Xiaoyao didn't expect, and even what everyone else didn't expect was that when the conflict outside the villa was on the verge of breaking out, Li Tianlan was on the big bed in the master bedroom of the villa, pressing Qin Weibai's back and fooling around. There was no black silk skirt, but the sexy lingerie could also make people have a nosebleed. Qin Weibai was sometimes cold, sometimes charming, sometimes dignified, and sometimes flirtatious. Even a saint couldn't bear it, let alone Li Tianlan. The atmosphere outside the villa was tense. Li Tianlan also wanted to go out, but he really couldn't control himself. Looking at Qin Weibai, who buried her pretty face in the quilt and let him do whatever he wanted, he held her soft and delicate waist. Li Tianlan really felt that he was willing to die. The bedroom was full of spring scenery. Outside the villa was murderous. At the critical moment of avenging his son, Tan Qinghua really didn't want to provoke Wang Xiaoyao, who spoke in a gentle voice as if he loved him when he said he would kill his whole family. Tan Qinghua vented all his evil anger on Zhuang Huayang, a general headmaster in the special warfare system, a deputy commander of a theater of operations in the military system. Tan Qinghua naturally wouldn't take Zhuang Huayang, who was about to retire, seriously. His patience had completely disappeared. Seeing that Zhuang Huayang was still in an unfathomable state, his expression became colder and colder. "Get out of the way!" I said, "You can't take anyone away today. Not to mention these 300 people. Even if there were 10 times more people, you still can't." Zhuang Huayang looked at Tan Qinghua with no expression. The electric light lingered between his fingers and gradually spread to his whole arm. At this moment, Zhuang Huayang was still elegant, but as the electric light spread and expanded on his arm, his whole person gained a trace of a strong and cold aura and style. "You're forcing me! You're forcing me! You're forcing me!" Tan Qinghua's tone became louder and louder. He suddenly roared, "Get out of the way!" Zhuang Huayang said nothing and just sneered. Tan Qinghua took a deep look at the motionless Zhuang Huayang, nodded and said, "Very good." Under Zhuang Huayang's suddenly focused eyes, Tan Qinghua spoke again, "Raging fire!" "Here." Raging Fire, who was blocking the entrance of the villa with 300 elites, responded loudly. Tan Qinghua glanced at Zhuang Huayang and said calmly, "Kill Ning Qianqing. Whoever dares to stop you, kill them too." Raging Fire looked at Zhuang Huayang in front of him. A red light flashed in his eyes and even the scar on his face became ferocious. He raised the submachine gun in his hand and aimed directly at Zhuang Huayang. Behind him, the 300 special warfare elites of the Eastern Theater of Operations were expressionless as they raised their guns at the same time. The corner of Raging Fire's mouth twitched and he directly roared, "Kill! Who dares?" A magnetic voice reverberated in the night sky, drifting and clear, as if it came from the horizon. Everyone looked up at the same time. The whizzing sound of the helicopter's rotors came from afar. The drifting voice came from above and covered the entire villa area in an instant. "Tan Qinghua, how dare you touch the people of my border control corps? Do you really think that I can't crush a fake wealthy family like the Tan family? Or do you think that the 550,000 professional soldiers of the border control corps don't dare to kill your so-called own people?" A helicopter flew in from hundreds of meters away. In the night, above the firmament, thunder suddenly roared and resounded through the sky. For a moment, the whizzing sound of the helicopter seemed to have disappeared. Everyone's ears were filled with a roar and only thunder could be heard. The sky above the entire villa area began to glow. Lightning flashed in the sky, revealing a kind of elegant and dangerous blue in the pale sky. A majestic sword intent as vast as the sea came crashing down from above like the power of heaven. In a trance, there was a kind of indomitable heroic spirit. There was a desolate killing intent between heaven and earth. The sword intent reached the ground from hundreds of meters high in the sky, and the entire villa area shook violently. In front of Jianghu, raging fire was walking at the forefront. The 300 Eastern Theater of Operations elites behind him were completely like powerless ants under this sword intent. The sword intent spread and hundreds of people were all sent flying. They fell from side to side and were instantly seriously injured. Jade Lake Sword Scripture. 9 Heavens Wind and Thunder Sword. The helicopter flew overhead. A figure, accompanied by the lightning that filled the sky, fell along with the thunderclaps. His figure landed directly in front of Tan Qinghua, who had an extremely ugly expression on his face. He reached out and grabbed Tan Qinghua's neck, lifting him up. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.